kick us off, I want to welcome everybody to our May. Wow, what a beautiful, beautiful May morning it is here in Houston, Texas. And our guest speaker is joining us from the wonderfully sunny St. Pete, Florida. So we've got just a whole lot of sunshine going on this morning. So I don't know about you, but I just think that's just some kismet. So we are going to bask in that. Good morning and welcome. My name is Alana Hill. I have the esteemed privilege and honor of presiding over the NSA Houston chapter this year. And as this year comes to winds down, I'm already kind of flooded with emotions of what a privilege it's been to serve, what a fantastic and committed board that we've had. And so I always love to start with honoring and acknowledging our board, because they go above and beyond their own work duties, their personal duties, to help not only put on our Saturday workshops, but our labs, our engaging with our members and making sure that they feel supported in what we all know has been a very, very difficult year. So I wanted to honor everybody, honor our board. So if you are a board member of NSA Houston, if you could please wave so we can acknowledge you. There you go. Everybody see those? Rob, we don't see you waving. He doesn't want acknowledgement this morning. There we go. All right. So thank you for our board. And we've got Jackie Harris as well, who's not waving, but I'm waving for you. We also have several other board members who unfortunately weren't able to make it today due to scheduling conflicts. But because they are all access pass holders, they will be able to review this. And that is so speaking of membership, and I'm going to close with that, but I wanted to intentionally open with that and close with that, because as we roll into June, we start looking at renewing our membership, renewing our commitment to the chapter. This is just a season of renewal. So one little seed that I want to drop is that we've made some exciting changes to our membership structure and membership pricing. So we'll conclude with the details of that, but just know that that's in the works, because we're constantly listening to and responding to the needs of our members. And we're excited to be responsive to that. So also within NSA, because NSA is a professional development association, so our goal is to develop professionally. And one of the ways that we can do that is through different levels, if you will, and I try not to speak too hierarchically, but there's certainly a progression that we have. So we have our candidate members, we have our professional members. So those of you who are professional members of NSA, please wave. We want to acknowledge you. These are speakers who are professionally speaking, who are making an active living speaking. We do have some members who are aspiring to that. And so one of the reasons for pointing that out is so that you see, because built-in mentoring, as well as to acknowledge those contributions. And then we've got our certified speaking our certified speaking professionals, which is a designation given to less than, I believe, 10%. That number fluctuates, of course, because it's statistical, but it's a very small percentage of speakers have that designation. And we are honored to have Ed Robinson, CSP. Ed, if you want to wave your hand. And if we have any other CSPs in the room, if you could please wave so that we can acknowledge you. Okay.
Dr. Shirley Davis.
Dr. Shirley Davis. Okay, I didn't want to speak out of turn. I was like, I thought she was, but yes. So absolutely, Dr. Shirley Davis, CSP. And we're so grateful to have you and that experience that credential represents. We've got a few other CSPs within our chapter, and that is great to help us continue to grow together. Remember that part of your membership is access to one another and that built-in community that we create. So we'll talk about that some more as we close. I just really love to just set off with a welcome. Thank you all for coming. So happy to see everyone. I've already seen Dr. Shirley's very energetic video. So we know that we are in for a treat. And so I'm going to get out of the way, and I want to bring up our Vice President of Programs to introduce our speaker for today. So Kim Davis, if you'll please introduce our speaker. Thanks.
Thanks, Alana. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for getting up on this Saturday morning, especially such a really refreshing Saturday morning in Houston. We don't have a lot of these. It's going to be really, really hot and humid soon. So thank you for spending it with us. You will not be disappointed. And thank you, Dr. Shirley Davis, for answering the call when I reached out to you a few months ago. We're super excited to have you. So the video was awesome. And so if you got a chance to see that, you got a taste of her energy. We're going to have two different kind of programs today. So we're going to be super informed. We're super excited and blessed to tell you a little bit about her without going through her entire bio, because she is more than accomplished. She's a corporate executive, global workforce expert, a certified leadership coach, a strategic development solutions firm. She's done everything from HR to diversity, equity, and inclusion to leadership to business development. So whatever you need, you can probably get some of it here today. She's not only really smart and accomplished, she's also kind of fancy, right? She was a former Miss District of Columbia. I had to share that, and Miss Oklahoma, Miss Virginia. So she's even, has the fancy lady side. She's not just smart and all in her head. So we're really glad to have you. She's been on television nationally. She's on the national board of NSA, and she is a CSP. So without me going on and just, gushing any further, Dr. Shirley Davis, thank you and welcome to NSA Houston.
Good. So I'm all set. I am excited this morning. Thank you again for this opportunity to be with you. Good morning. Good morning. I bring you greetings from, yes, beautiful, sunny Tampa Bay, but also home of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We call ourselves now Champa Bay because we also are the Stanley Cup champions. And we also, as you know, last year, our baseball team too, the Rays, went to the World Series as well. So we're just an area of winners and champions. But you know what? I am thrilled this morning to be amongst other champions. And that is what I call my NSA family, champion of speakers, champions of business entrepreneurs. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. So as Kim mentioned, first of all, Kim and I are not related in blood, but we believe in sisterhood. So we both have the last name of Davis, but no actual biological. So she's not doing any nepotism here. She just reached out to Dr. Shirley Davis. And I'm thrilled to have this opportunity. I am going to, as she mentioned, talk about two topics, but both related, because this is all about how do we ensure that we are taking our businesses to the next level? How do we ensure we're driving great revenue streams and building sustainable businesses, leaving a legacy? And the way that we do that is to ensure, first of all, that we are reinventing our businesses. And we do that by reinventing ourselves. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. This morning, I'm going to start out talking about some of our own blind spots and how those things can also cost us business as well. So look, this is going to be interactive. It's going to be certainly engaging, certainly high energy, because I am doing what I love, but I'm also talking about something that I know. And I want to this morning engage you. So please, as we talk a bit about these topics, there's going to be opportunities to do chat. There's going to be opportunities to do polls. And certainly I want you to do some self-assessing. I was keynoting at a conference not too long ago, and I did an opening icebreaker where I asked people to stand up if the statements that I was reading applied to them. I had a blind spot because on the left side of the room, back in the back, there was a person in the wheelchair who couldn't stand up. How do you think that may have made that person feel? I was also speaking at a medical conference of over 1,000 neurologists, oncologists, and radiologists. And the only African-American male in the room was about 6'5", looked just like Lawrence Fishburne. So I already had an affinity to him, but he also stood out because he was a nice looking African-American male, 6'5". So after the session was over, we struck up a conversation right there in the hallway. And before I knew it, I was asking that stereotypical question. You know what it was? What college did you play basketball? And his response was, I didn't play basketball. I went to college and I actually graduated with a degree in radiology. I was also speaking at a global technology firm, and I was referencing the days when we had those 8-track tapes and cassette players. And I made a statement that I said to the audience, y'all don't know nothing about that. My blind spot or my blind spots was that I assumed that because I was talking to a bunch of technology people that everybody in the room must be a millennial. I also had a blind spot because I assumed that millennials couldn't possibly know about that time in my era. Another example, I was speaking at the Gaylord in Washington, D.C. about 2 years ago. And I made a reference to the Washington Redskins, assuming that everybody in the room was a Washington Redskin fan. And I overlooked another blind spot. And if you've been following the news over the last few years or last decade of the ongoing debate, especially about the Washington Redskins, there's been a fight about the racial overtone and the meaning of the Redskins. And so, as you know, after a long, long debate, they finally changed their name. But that was another blind spot of mine. Those are just a few of my examples of my blind spots. And look, I've been in human resources for nearly 30 years. I've been a global head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for 3 major organizations, Fortune 50, Fortune 100, and at the world's largest human resources association, the Society for Human Resource Management. So you would think that I know better. And you would think that other well-known speakers and celebrities would also know better. Tony Robbins, a few years ago, said that women were using the Me Too movement to gain significance by destroying and attacking someone else. When he got challenged and he received bad publicity and lost millions of dollars in business from women, then he issued an apology. You might remember Tom Brenneman, broadcaster for the Cincinnati Reds. He used a homophobic slur during a live broadcast when the hot mic was still on. And he was pulled off the air and immediately suspended from doing the Cincinnati Reds broadcast. Marsha Clark, our fellow colleague and DEI trainer and consultant, doing one of her executive training programs, she said to the women, she said, you need to be polished and you've got to have good haircuts and you got to have manicured nails and well-cut attire that complements your body. Which then she went on and said, gave a warning, and don't flaunt your body because sexuality scrambles the mind for men and for women. Now, this was training that was done by a very large global consulting firm, and their response to it was to object to the outrage that happened on social media when it was publicized. They denied any problems with the language, and then they tried to justify it with statements that executive women who said they didn't have any problem with it. So I guess it was all good. Look, we are not immune. Our own members of NSA have posted on social media about some of the comments and jokes that they have had in their presentations for years. And now they're realizing, or they're becoming woke now, that they are likely insensitive and biased in those presentations. And then there have been comments and photos about even current events and news stories that have been interpreted by some as biased, discriminatory, racist, sexist, misogynistic, all of those and all the above. Look, the Tony Robbins, the Tom Brennemans, and the Marsha Clarks of the world, they likely can afford to take a hit, to lose a little money and lose some clients and lose some followers. And as we can see, they all bounced back. But the question is, their businesses suffered the missteps. Can yours? Can ours? Look, all of us have blind spots. All of us have biases. And as speakers, these blind spots can cause us to make insensitive, incendiary, and illegal comments that can cost us business. Let's face it, we are living in the era of the 3 C's: accelerated change, overwhelming complexity, and increased competition. And we're more polarized than ever before. We're more divided than we've ever been. Yet we're living in a world where it's much more diverse. And it's going to continue to be that way. I'll talk a little bit more about that in my next section. But in the midst of it all, in the midst of 3 pandemics, we have been experiencing major disruption. We are now revisiting some of the things that we didn't talk about, what we call taboo topics. We're revisiting this era to where now we recognize that things we say matter. They've always mattered, but now we have social media. Now things go viral, right? Now people will protest. People will not do business with you, and they will form an entire campaign of not doing business. Look at what's happening right now in our society. Lots of polarization. This becomes even more important for us as speakers, presenters, consultants, coaches, because the world, even as it has become more global and diverse, more multicultural, multi-generational, we are also more hyper-connected, and we're working and doing business now more virtually and certainly more remote. So let me ask you, and I want you to put it in the chat, what are some of the demographic shifts that you've seen over the last few years that you know it has a real impact in the differences in the audiences now that you're speaking to? Put that in the chat. What are some of those demographic shifts that you're starting to see? And I call them demographic disruptions, because they're disrupting the workplace, they're disrupting leadership, they're disrupting organizational brands and reputations, and they are causing us to have to reposition and to pivot how we show up, how we speak, how we communicate, how we lead, yes, and how we do business. So let me see here in the chat. What do you have? A couple of those I want to make sure I see as well. Good. Thank you for putting some of those in here. These shifts that we start to see more of. Yes, we see younger, more diverse audiences. Absolutely. We see more college students who are not coachable. Some are, some are not, right? But let's see, college students, how many of you would say, yeah, I see a few older seasoned people too that are not as coachable. Younger people needing financial advice earlier. Yeah, that's an important one too. My daughter, who's 27, I know y'all are like, what, 27? Because you don't look for 35. She's 27 years old. But my daughter was saying to me not too long ago, she was like, Mom, you used to tell me all the time about how important it was to save money and put money aside and don't get into those credit card debts when you're in college. And now she's recognizing I needed to have listened to my mom, because now she's got to dig herself out. And I'm a let her. People are working longer. Someone says, yes, more people of color. So these are how our audiences are changing. Absolutely. Any others that you see? Any other shifts, demographic shifts, different from 10 and 15 years ago? You might remember like in 2000, like the Hudson Institute put out the study about workforce 2020. And now we got studies out now about workforce 2030 and 2050. Oh, I love that one. Thanks, Jackie. Jackie says women with more power. Yes, yes, yes. I love that. And we're starting to see too, not only women with more power, but more consumer spending power. Yes, yes, yes. And more entrepreneurs. Do you know that most of the businesses that are opening up now, more than 60% of all new businesses that are opening up and as entrepreneurs are being opened up by women, and women of color as well too. So yes, let me share my screen. I want to share with you a little bit about how this workforce is continuing to change. So you hit on some of them already. Here's the reality is that you're right. We have more women than ever before in the workforce, 50%. Now the global workforce made up of women, and some countries less than others, but we're starting to see this trend. More women. Not only do we have more women in the workforce, but we also have more women who are going back to get their education, right? From associates to doctorate degrees, 60% of all of those earned degrees are by women. I got a few more statistics about women, but this is very important because as we see that more and more women are in the workforce, what are we also seeing? We don't see necessarily that there is parity in pay and promotions and senior leadership representation. When you look in boardrooms and you look at the tops of organizations, we still don't see that. When you think about now the Fortune 500, let me do just a quick trivia. When you think about the Fortune 500 companies, how many out of the 500 are headed up by women? Somebody put it in the chat. How many? What do you think? Out of the 500, don't Google it, just put it in there real quick. Put it in there real quick. How many are, okay, so we got a few of them. So 5%, about 5, 8. Okay, well, good news is we're a little bit more than that, right? So it is in the double digits. Ed, you are the closest at 35, right? So right now we've got about 41 women out of 500. Now, let me tell you something. That is a huge jump. More than ever in history, we have more women heading up Fortune 500s. 41 women, right? We now know the most recent one was TIAA. The CEO, a Black female, just started. Another Black female, Rosalind Brewer, started with Walgreens Boots Alliance. She used to be the CEO at Sam's Club as well. So we're seeing more and more women take the helm, but again, 41 out of 500. And yet this is historical for us. So we do have more work to do. We still know that women make 77 to 85 cents for every dollar that their male counterpart makes doing the same thing. You know what else is interesting? I talked about the 60% of women now are the ones that are earning the degrees. There was a study that was done by Catalyst and the Center for Talent Innovation, and they did this longitudinal study looking at women and men in business schools, going back to get their MBAs. And they looked at the top 10 business schools around the world, top 10, and they studied them over a period of time. What they found was that whenever they graduated, from the same MBA school with the same MBA degree, that when the men and women would go out into the workforce, men on average earn $4,000 more in their salaries than their female counterpart. Same school, same degree. Why is that the case? Why do you think that women made $4,000 less than their male counterparts coming out of business school? What's the reality there? What you hear? What do you hear? You can always too. I'm happy to ask you, please, you can unmute yourself. Let's have a conversation. You can put it in chat as well. I want you to engage. What do you think's going on there? I mean, obviously we're talking this morning about speaker blind spots, but there's blind spots inside of our organizations, and we have to address some of those. And listen, here's some of the things I also want you to hear. Not only do I want you to hear this for your own personal development, but I want you to hear this because these are trends and hot topics that your clients are dealing with as well. So anything that you can use from this as a nugget, put it in your presentations, because these are the realities that they're grappling with, right? Someone says negotiations. Yes, they were willing to take less. Ooh, yeah. Hidden bias. Absolutely. Someone else says negotiations. So yes, absolutely. You just yesterday on LinkedIn, you'll see in my feed that I put out a study yesterday by Forbes magazine that showed that women feel like they have to have 90 to 100% of all of the qualifications and the skills before they even apply for a job. Men only have to have 60% before they feel comfortable. And look, I was in recruiting. I headed up recruiting for 10 years. I worked in every area of human resources. And I can tell you that is my experience of those 10 years and interviewing hundreds and thousands of candidates. It was inevitable constantly that when we would offer the women a job and we would give them the base of it, you know what they would say? Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled. I'm so honored. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. When do I start? And guess what the men said? When we gave them what the salary was, the starting salary, they said, I appreciate that. That's a great start. Here's what I was thinking. They negotiated. So that's key and critical for us to remember too. So I think I saw a couple of you say that, didn't negotiate, right? And that's exactly the reality. But the other part of it too is that, yes, when you look at social norms, we haven't been socialized to necessarily speak up and ask for it, not early on. Now, I know that that's changing quite a bit now with the new generation that's coming in. But the old school, those that are baby boomers, those that are Gen Xers, like some of us on here, I don't know how many millennials we have, but I think I see a lot of Gen Xers. I see definitely, some of us as baby boomers as well. But we were not taught to speak up and step up like that as women. We were taught more to be more passive, more accepting. And again, your place is in the home, and in the home is in the kitchen, right? And dot, dot, dot. So excellent. I am constantly seeing this, and I appreciate that we're seeing a shift, but it's not fast enough. There's definitely a lot more work to be done around equity. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ed. I appreciate you for coming. Thank you again. I should say Uncle Grandpa Ed. Good to see you. Thanks again for being here. I know you got to run. So as we think about the workforce, the biases are pervasive. They're pervasive in our organizations. They're pervasive in how we hire. They're pervasive in who gets a seat at the table, who gets promoted, who gets put on boards, who heads up organizations, right? So that's a very important piece to just think about as well too. So we definitely have some more work to do, but yeah, biases are very, very pervasive and they play a role in this. The other thing we know about the global workforce and how it's changing is that religious beliefs are on the rise and people who self-identify. And here's the thing, you hear more and more companies in the, and especially in this last year or so, we want everyone to bring their full self into the workplace. We want them to bring their most authentic self, be your most authentic person. But then if you do that, right, you bring your most authentic self into the workplace and then you get judged, or people look at you and they don't necessarily want to have you at the table. They don't necessarily want to hire you when you bring in your full self. Because my full self might be that I'm coming in and I am as a woman, as a person of color, as a woman of faith, as a single mom. I might be, labeled, I identify as LGBTQ. I may have a disability. I may have a few tattoos. I may even have a couple of piercings. Can I still be my full self, bring my full self into the workplace and not be judged? If I got the qualifications, if I got the skills, if I got the experience, and I know I can knock the job out of the park, will I still be accepted? I want you to think about this in the context of the clients that you're working with, in the context of the workforces and the organizations you're serving, and more importantly, in your audiences. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, but think about how polarizing it is right now to identify as that. Now, we know by the World Fact Book, 33% of the world still identifies as Christian. So it's still the largest right now, but the fastest growing religion in the world is Islam. So I deal a lot with Islamophobia, right? And when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to think about this in the context of how do you schedule meetings? I have clients that I have to be careful about Ramadan and Rosh Hashanah and some of the other holidays, religious holidays that may not be Christian holidays. We have to be sensitive to that. You have to be sensitive to the food that you serve, right? You have to be sensitive to the things that you say. So yes, absolutely key and critical. I was with a client and they had scheduled a big meeting and got big pushback from some of their senior leaders who said, wait a minute, I can't believe that you're scheduling this big meeting during Ramadan. If it was Easter, right, or Good Friday or Christmas, it wouldn't have been scheduled. So I want us to think about that as well too. These are some of the blind spots that we do all have. We know that there are 7 billion people on the planet, but research tells us that 1 in 7 lives with a disability. So you heard one of my opening examples of my blind spots, that I had not looked around. I had not even asked if people needed a disability. I had not been observant that someone was in the audience with a wheelchair. Now, I may not be able to see that in an audience of 1,000 or more people. But one of the things we have to always be thinking about is our blind spots, right? But also, as you build culturally sensitive presentations, is always assume that you may have someone. If 1 in 7 and you got more than 7 people in the room, likely someone's got a disability. And here's the reality. As you've been doing more of this via virtual and remote work, we've been delivering it this way. I have had to do much more around having closed captions on. Right? I hadn't even thought about that before. But more and more clients are saying we need to have closed caption on because we do have. I had to take an entire one of my training programs and have it translated into Spanish because over half of their workforce of 25,000, right, were Spanish speakers or English was their second language. And so we had to have it translated. Those are the kinds of things you want to think about. If you're going to be playing videos as well, too, think about then having even the videos, having the captions on them as well. You may have to, again, ensure that some of your programs have Braille as another means of communication. So those are the things to be thinking about. People do have disabilities and we have to, again, make those accommodations. So what I've been learning as I do intake calls with clients and we're talking about the logistics, I will ask, are there some specific special accommodations that need to be made? Okay, I was talking about women, right? Women now control about 20 trillion in annual consumer spending. And that figure is expected to climb to nearly 30 trillion by 2025. So a lot of the decisions that are made in organizations and even in households are being made by women. So consider again, what shifts and changes do you need to make, even in that regard? By 2030, so in less than 10 years, right, 54% of the US population will be people of color, Black and brown people, right? And the EEOC, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, identifies people of color as what we call BIPOCs, right? Black or African American, also Latina, Latinx, Hispanic, Asian Americans or Asian Pacific Islander, as well as Native Americans, right? So now we've come up with a new term. So if you hear BIPOC, that's what that means, Black Indigenous People of Color. So you'll see that quite a bit now. Companies that you're working with, they may ask you, how do you speak to an audience of BIPOCs? That's exactly what that means. Also, we know that we got the 5 generations. They're already here and they're prominent. But let me give another trivia question. Out of the 5 generations, which 2 are the largest? Which 2 are the largest generations? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. All right, so we see millennials and Gen Z. Someone says the Gen X and the boomers. Someone says the baby boomers and the millennials. And Kim, you are correct. Yes, yes, yes. The baby boomers and the millennials, Margaret, you're correct. Thank you. They are the two largest of our population. Now, there's 5 generations in general around the world, but I'm going to talk specifically here about the US as well. Is because the two of the largest being the baby boomers and the millennials, here's the other reality. You got one that's kind of exiting, and then you got one that's now here, and they're going to be here for a long time. So the baby boomers, about 79 million, according to AARP, 79 million baby boomers in the US population. And over the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to be exiting the workforce into what I call rewirement. Most of them don't retire. They just rewire, right? They go off and do other things, like my parents that are 75 and 76 years old. They retired years ago, but they're still working. They're still in the workforce doing part-time consulting or whatever, right? And so you'll see more and more of that because we're living longer, right? Living way past our retirement years. So even your audiences may be a very, very multi-generational audience. And yet, when we look at the 79 million that's baby boomers, you look at now the generation, what we call Y or millennials, they are now the largest. So while the boomers make up about 31% of the workforce, the millennials make up 34%, and they're continuing to grow. So now they're in the workforce. They're between the ages. Usually I'll say, you'll see it. But then some people have different age cohorts that they look at as well. But the millennials are somewhere between the ages of about 23 up to about age 34, 35. And then you get into the Gen X. As a matter of fact, I think that number changed a little bit. Instead of 35, I think it's up to 39 and 40 now. So the oldest millennial is 40 years old, turned 40 years old, I think in 2020 last year. All right. So recognizing that you're going to have multi-generational audiences, and how do you make sure that your message is hitting all of them? That it's practical, it's relatable, and for them that they feel like it can be applied in their lives every day. And that's what they're looking for. So that's another key and critical piece there. The other part that we have to think about is the fact that we have now 10 million Americans self-identify as LGBTQ plus, right? You'll see the plus, and some of them you'll see IA, right? So when you think about LGBTQ plus, right, recognizing that that's about 4.5% of the US population, but there may be so many more who are in your audiences who have not self-identified, simply because, as we see, we're so polarized, right? And there's still a lot of conversation about LGBTQ plus, and people, make it a religious issue, they make it a political issue, right? So whatever spectrum you're on, recognize that as a speaker, we have to be very open, and we have to be inclusive, we have to be sensitive and culturally competent to the realities that our audiences are all different. The last one I want to share with you, and there's a lot more, but I wanted to give you some of the most pervasive and most, right now, the things that are most impactful in the workforce, the marketplace, are these shifts. These are where the conversations are going. And by 2030, the world's population of those that are over 65 will hit 1 billion. 1 billion people on the planet out of the 7 billion will be older people. Okay, so think about that as well. Yes, 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 yes. Now, that's the reality. We're living in a more global, diverse, multicultural, virtual, hyper-connected society. And guess what? We all have bias. All of us do. We all have biases, and we have got to learn how to work effectively across differences, even when we don't understand it. And quite frankly, guess what? We don't understand over half of all the differences that are out there. We all work and live in our tribes. We work and live in our bubbles. We work and live in our own little small communities. Yes. And some of us have done a lot better of getting out and engaging with people who are not like us, and understanding differences, and becoming more aware, and having, bigger, broader conversations with people who are different, who think different, look different, work different, believe different, even vote different. Yes, but that is how we become much more culturally competent. So what does this all mean for you? Let me hear from some of you as I've gone through these realities. This is the workplace, the marketplace that we're working with, that we're serving, that you're speaking to. Let's hear I want to hear some conversations from you. What are some of the implications for you, or some of the blind spots for you that you've already kind of started to identify that, wow, I've got this one, or you know what, I've got to be more sensitive here, or I'm going to have to shift my presentations or my speaking style because of, right? Let's hear from some of you. Thoughts there. You can come off of mute. Anybody, what are some of your thoughts on how you're going to have to shift? What does this all mean for you as speakers?
This is Elena. I was going to say that we have to be really mindful of the words that we use because they'll mean different things to different people because of their backgrounds.
That's right. Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Elena. Who else?
This is Kim. I agree with Elena, and I also think when we talk about being inclusive, we have to be willing to have difficult conversations and to be able to talk to people who may not think like us. We have to be okay with that. And we have to help our audiences do that too.
Yes, yes, thank you, absolutely. Anyone else?
So when I speak or write, I use a lot of metaphors, and I have to be more conscious of, for example, well, I won't even say any examples, but there are a lot of terms that have bias built into them or discrimination built into them.
That's right. Yeah, and certainly, again, even as you build your presentations, your PowerPoint slides, guess what? You even have to be sensitive to what people do you put in it? Are the people that you use reflective of the audiences? If you have all people from one group that all look alike, you're going to have people in the audiences feeling like, oh, no, that doesn't reflect me, right? So you have to be sensitive even to who you use, what you use. I use people sometimes, but be careful because, you know, you may have someone say, well, I saw all women in that picture. Gosh, I saw all men in that, or I saw all white people in that one, or I saw all people of color in that one, or I didn't see one person with a disability, right? That sometimes that will come up as well too. So I want you to think about, as we build our presentations, we've got to present across differences. That means in every audience, with every client, they're going to have different needs. They're going to have different expectations. Expectations, one, of how you communicate to them. Do you know that when you're speaking to an audience, you got to speak to those with different thinking styles, different beliefs, different values? They're at different levels. They have different experiences. And it's a lot for you to have to think about. Let me keep going. They have different work ethics. They have different views and personality styles, different values, things that they believe. They have different experiences and exposures. They come from different cultures, different geographic locations, and they communicate differently. So, I mean, you have to do a lot of different things. So, you know, you got kinesthetic learners, you got auditory learners, right? So you have people who learn different, think different. So we have to be very sensitive to that, even in our presentations. What are some of the things that you've noticed in my presentations so far that I've done to be able to relate to everyone on the session this morning? What are some things that stand out for you?
Well, your visuals are inclusive, right? So for starters, it's inclusive in terms of just what we see. And when you talk about different groups, it seems you talk about it in a broad spectrum of groups. And I think also the fact that you say we all have biases, it puts the audience at ease. They don't have to feel attacked or guilty.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. So I am trying to use inclusive language. I am telling personal stories. I started out with my biases so that you recognize that, oh, she's not just talking to us. She's talking to all of us, and she's included, that she's not talking over our heads, but she's talking about what she knows and what she's experiencing. And anytime you can humanize yourself, anytime you can relate to your audience in a personal way, they really receive you better. Right? You come off as more authentic as well. Anything else that you've seen as well, too, that you've seen me doing to better relate to you, my diverse audience here?
You talked about age differences, like millennials and including people that are millennials. And also you talked about, like you use terms like people of color, LGBTQ, you use terms that are typically more acceptable than what was acceptable in the past. So you've kind of brought the language up to, what is modern.
Excellent. Great catch. Thank you so much. Yep, absolutely doing that very thing. And I think that's what we all have to think about is who's in our audience. So one of the things that I also did was I came in earlier, right? I'm not one of those speakers that's going to show up 5 minutes, blow up, blow in, and blow back out, right? I'm not one of those speakers. I'm going to come early. I want to get to know the audience. I want to see who's in my audience. And you have to be able to tweak as you need to along the way as well. So when I got in here, I had a chance to build rapport, build relationship. And you know what that does? It eases my anxiety, but it also helps us to better relate. It makes you feel comfortable of engaging as well. You see that I have a couple of different things. I started out telling you stories without showing you anything. Then I brought up some visuals, right? Visuals that are large enough for you to see. You look at the font. The font is big, big and brilliant and bold. I like to use colors as well too, but be careful about too many colors because you may have people who are colorblind. Like there's a time where I will do an exercise where I will have people identify different colors. And what I'll say to the audience is, I'm going to do this exercise now, and I'm going to ask you to identify the colors and the letters. But if you are colorblind, I'm going to ask you to just listen and observe and tell us what you're hearing. And so you have to acknowledge that. Okay. Now, when I do my exercise on stand up if, I'll say, raise your hand if, right? So that, again, it's much more inclusive. So those are the things. Anything else that you saw me do to really be more sensitive to my audience and be more inclusive?
Well, when you ask for responses, you're giving two options. You can either enter in the chat or you can speak up.
Thank you. Good. So this isn't just me doing all the talking to you. I want to hear from you. I recognize, look, I studied a lot of pedagogy when I was doing my master's degree in adult education. Pedagogy is about the way adults learn. Adults want to be able to share their experiences. They want to be able to engage. They don't want to be talked to or talked down. They want to engage, and they want you to include them, include their stories, and let them share as well. Very good. Thank you. And then two, the variety of things, right? Whether it's chat, whether it's a poll, whether it's a video, whether it's an activity, whether it's a game. You've heard me say, this is for you to think about. I want you to identify where you may have some of your own blind spots, and we're going to do more of that as well. We have to become culturally competent. If we're going to build culturally sensitive presentations, recognizing that we do all have these biases and blind spots, we need to build cultural competence. I know as speakers, we want to be the best speaker on the stage, and we want to knock it out of the park, and we want to be engaging. We want to be, we want to stand in ovation. But look, here's the other reality. One of the skills that we've got to learn and truly hone is the ability, the will, and the skill to work effectively across differences, talking and presenting across differences, and to build these kinds of presentations where we are open to different cultures, different ways of learning, different perspectives, different ways of doing things, so that it allows us to strengthen our sensitivity in a way that we can really, truly be effective in working with our clients and serving. Make sense? Good. So I'm going to ask you, now that you know what cultural competence is, I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you rate yourself? And I would say, put it in the chat, but if you really want to be personal about it, just only send it to me privately in the chat. You don't have to tell everybody what you rate yourself. Put it in the chat. On a scale of 1 to 5, how culturally competent do you believe you are? All right. Thank you for sharing. Someone says on a scale of 1 to 5, 5, 4, 4. Okay. So we've got some pretty culturally competent speakers and presenters. Good. I got a couple of more 4s as well. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yet, even though we still feel like we're 4s and 5s, we still all have biases, we still all have prejudice, and we still have blind spots, and they can certainly play out in our presentations and even in the way that we coach and the way that we work with our clients. Look, our speaker blind spots really are informed from our beliefs, right? The things that we heard growing up, the things that we were taught, the experiences that we had, but also our behaviors. And those beliefs really is what drives our behaviors. And ultimately, too, it can affect our brand, right? So our speaker blind spots has these 3 impacts. We call them the 3 B's of speaker blind spots is beliefs, behaviors, and brand. So what are some specific behaviors that we might engage in? or some beliefs that could be expressed in our writing and speeches that could negatively impact our brands. So I opened up this morning sharing with you some of my stories of some things that I've learned. Look, and those were things that's happened over the last couple of years, but look, I've even had some happen even more recently. I used a term with a client and I said, you know what, that's a great idea. I'm going to take it back to my team and we'll powwow about that. What was wrong with that statement?
Powwow.
What's wrong with that, Stephanie? Yeah, that's exactly right.
Because that's actually a slur against Indigenous Americans, the Indians.
Yep.
We don't do that anymore. That's
right.
Old school. Yes.
Yep. So my little old school self made that comment. And what was great about it was a great relationship that I had with my client, that they felt like they could trust me enough that after that call was over, that he called me personally and said, hey, I wanted to share with you something, some feedback about the meeting we just had. And he went on to share with me because he's Native American. And he talked to me a little bit about what that meant. And I thanked him. See, that's the thing about too, when you're culturally competent, it doesn't mean you never make mistakes. It means that you're open to feedback and learning and being coached and correcting the behavior. So I thanked him for that. And now it has become an opportunity for me to educate others as well. Not only that, I was working with a client and I kept saying, you guys. Right now, I'm a Southern girl born in North Carolina on a farm. And for us, that was more, it was a Southern draw as part of my own culture. So I had to be sensitive to the fact that they were very much focused on their pronouns of she and her and he and his, right? And so they didn't like the reference to you guys. So again, so here's what I did. I said, I appreciate that you're all focusing on your pronouns, and I've shared with you my little Southern drawl and some of the jargon that I may use. So I am going to apologize up front if it slips out that I say you guys. I said, now I'm going to apologize up front. And I said, but you're going to also see me course correct. What I did was I began to model the behaviors that I was teaching them to do. That not that I'm not going to make a mistake, I will. But when I make the mistake, and I did, I said it a couple of times, I said, oops, I just made a mistake. I already have some grace, right? And I would just make it be a part of the presentation. And they appreciated that. And what I said to the leaders, I said, leaders, this is how it is. I said, you may say something. It could be a microaggression. It could be something that's insensitive. It could be something that someone reminds you that, oh, that really diminished me. And I said, and now what I'm modeling to you is when someone does it, or when you do it and someone tells you that it hurts, you now need to listen. You need to apologize, take ownership of it, and then you need to course correct. I said, be willing to do that in meetings. Be willing to do it in front of your audiences because they need to see your vulnerability too. That's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Make sense?
Yes.
Good. So again, what I want us to think about is some of the other areas where we can really, as I say too, I want to kind of get some examples from you. I've shared some of mine, but I want to hear from some of y'all too. Consider some of the blind spots. What have been some of yours? Where you have made some of those faux pas or you've had to course correct as a result as well too. Because every day, all day, we are running into people who are different from us. And there is a likelihood that we may say something or do something that could be incendiary. So anyone want to share an example of a learning that you had and how did you respond?
Well, I've used the you guys before too, and I was speaking at it. This was several years ago, and one of the people there was actually in the audience was a pastor, but he knew my family, and he pulled me to the side and said, "They're not you guys," you know. And so for him, it was a whole different thing. And so what I did was to own it and said, you know, I sometimes say this. Let me apologize if it's offensive. I don't mean to put everybody into one boat.
That's right.
And so just all you got to do, and I gave them permission to, you know, I made it kind of light to, you know, let me know if I slip up along the way. It'll be interactive. You just tell me. And so then it didn't feel awkward. But the big thing was to not be defensive and to be dismissive of somebody having a thought that was different from mine.
Absolutely. That's right. Thank you for sharing that, Kim. Yep. Alana says the guys, y'all gets me a lot. I'm a big y'all too, because again, that's that Southern draw. I don't, you know what? And here's the thing. I haven't had much pushback about the y'all, because part of what I will share with people too is cut people some slack, right? No one's going to be perfect. Assume positive intent. And when you build trust and build relationship with people, they give you the benefit of the doubt. And so I say to them, I am a Southern girl. I was born on a farm. I got a lot of Southern hospitality traits in me. And every now and then you'll hear it come out in the form of y'all, right? And so when I say that, they're okay with it. But if I know particularly, like even I was saying, you guys, when they were focusing on their pronouns, it was an easy correction for me to say, I'm going to work on this today. And I have been doing it. And quite frankly, the more you say it and do it, the more it raises your level of awareness and your level of cultural competence. So here I am today talking to you about something that happened a few months ago, but I'm still aware of it, right? So it's helping me to shift my level of bias in that way and become less biased on that. I still got other stuff to work on. All right. Someone says, oh, Alice, share yours, Alice. Can she come on? Oh,
I'm coming on.
There you go.
Yeah, I used the term the Orient. And I have a sister-in-law who's from Indonesia. And so I should know better. But someone pointed out to me that that is not a correct term, that it is actually very Western-centric.
Yeah, and even, you know, the word Oriental can also be perceived as a real blind spot as well, too. It could be very insensitive. Anybody else, things that you learned yourself in your presentations about your own blind spots?
I was just going to say, Dr. Shirley, on the y'all. So I laugh, I make fun of that, and I prefer y'all, but I slip up with you guys. So my lazy typing there was I try to pull back on the you guys, but also kind of point it out like you do that I know that's not, you know, I'd rather just show how Southern I am, you know.
That's right. We don't want people walking on eggshells.
Right. Yeah.
We don't want people to feel like they can never get anything right. And we don't want to correct people all the time. No, if it's something that's very, very personal to you, then that's fine to allow someone to share that. But we all have to, again, recognize that everyone is on a learning curve and no one has the corner on the market of understanding difference. We're all on that journey. Consider some of these other blind spots. For example, has your microphone ever stopped working and you said, oh, don't worry about it, I can just speak louder? What's wrong with that statement?
You're assuming that everybody can hear you. Everybody
Yeah.
has the hearing that they can hear you. Right?
Absolutely, Kim. Yes, so that might be true that you can speak louder, but what about those who do have like a hearing impairment? Your voice may not be loud enough for them to be able to hear. And this, again, can put them in a position to then have to sort of identify themselves or expose themselves in front of an audience. And that can really cause embarrassment. Here's another one, using the word the and those as an identifier for a particular group that you may be speaking to in your audiences. So for example, those millennials, those baby boomers, the Blacks or the gays or the Jews, those Hispanics. What's wrong with that?
You're treating them like a monolith. It seems like it.
Yeah, look, while you may not mean anything by using some of those terms, they can be interpreted as a way of otherizing the group, meaning this us versus them.
Us and them.
It can be, it could be very polarizing, and it could be putting, you could be put it off. It could be a put off to other people. Even telling a joke that involves somebody of a different ethnicity or a different gender, or even imitating an accent, or even doing something with your body for emphasis, like physically manipulating your eyes. That could be perceived as, again, an attack. It could be perceived as disrespectful. And again, you off-putting to someone else. And again, think about this. Is your speech or presentation riddled with gender assumptions, right? Are you using one gender to signify certain roles, but then you use other terms to identify other roles, right? So when you talk about assistants and secretaries and subordinates, be careful who you're looking at or who you're actually referring to. So these are things that we want to think about. I want to go back and share my screen again because I want us to talk a little bit more about bias and what is it and why do we really have to be aware of some of these? Where do they come from? Why are they so critical and key now? Why is everybody focusing on it? I love the fact that this is what most companies, as they're looking at their D&I efforts, they're saying, look, we got to get back to understanding that we all have these biases. And so I could not be busier doing work on how do you transform your culture to be more inclusive, more equitable, more high performing? How do you make your cultures to be a safe to speak culture? How do you ensure that your speakers, your presenters, your providers, your suppliers are focusing on diversity and inclusion? I don't know about you, but I've got a number of clients who now have decided that they're only going to do business with certain types of organizations who are also focusing on DE&I. I've had some law firms come to me because their corporate clients have said, I looked at the top of your organizations and not one partner is a visible, diverse person. Right? So there's pressure there. I'm looking at your board and there's no people of color on your board. You mean you don't have any women and there's 50% of women in the workforce? So there's some pressure. There's some real push for organizations to really see this as an important, significant part of their business. So when we talk about implicit bias or unconscious bias, it's a tendency and an inclination that results in a judgment. We don't even have control over it. It just happens, right? We are hardwired for bias. So can I say that again? We are hardwired as humans. We have bias as a part of our human makeup. But why do we need bias?
Sometimes it's safety. Sometimes we use them like as coping mechanisms and to put stuff in categories and say, this, I've seen this happen this way, and your brain works to protect you. So some of the biases are very helpful in survival, but then it bleeds over into other things that, you know, we just keep on going through, you know, because that you're always going to protect yourself. You're always going to feel comfortable, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. It allows us to process information, but it also comes from a place of protection, security, safety, keeping us from danger or dangerous people or what we perceive to be someone that could be hurt to us or danger to us. So it's a tendency, and look, it's an automatic response. We need bias to help us just interpret the world, to be able to automatically respond to the world, because there's so much information coming at us at one time. We do not have the ability to be able to truly interpret all of the information, millions and millions of information coming at us at one time, and we don't have the ability. Our brain does not have the capacity to be able to process everything. So we focus in on what we know, what we're comfortable with. And then at a very, very young age, we are taught about unconscious biases. Now, how many of you know that unconscious biases can be positive or negative? Give me a positive bias. Give me an example of a positive one. And one I shared earlier, right? A positive bias that still may not be true is that we assume that, you know, tall Black men all are good at basketball. Or we assume that all Asians are good at science and math. Or we assume that all Jews are wealthy. Where is this coming from, right? We learn these things, and based on our learning, right, and because we've been socialized this way, we tend to respond to people that way. What if you assume that women don't make really good managers and you never hire a woman to lead a team? What if you don't believe that women would make good CEOs and so we only have 41? I mean, think about that. We have now boards of directors. Whenever they lose a CEO, they have to come together and say, we have to fill this position, but it must be male and we need somebody over six feet tall. Because the reality is, look, when you look at our population, the average height of the American male is 5'8", 5'9". That's the average height. But the average height of the American CEO is over 6 feet tall. So there is a bias, right? A bias is simply a preference. A bias is simply an association that we have based on what we've been taught, based on what we learn. And really it comes from what we call learned rules, right? There are attitudes and stereotypes that are formed at a very young age, and they are strengthened over time based on not only what we learn at home, but also what we learn in the workplace, what we learn in lived experiences, what we see on TV, what we listen to on the news, what we read in the newspapers, what we learn in school, what we learn in the relationships, especially the close relationships that we have. Our places of worship are reinforcing our biases. Our communities, whether it is the communities we live in or whether it is the communities that we're a part of, even on social media groups or communities, they're influencing and impacting the way that we think, the way that we see the world, the lenses in which we see the world out of. And so this is who we are. We are the sum total of what we've been taught, the messages that we heard. At an early age, I was taught, look both ways before crossing the street. Today, you don't have to tell me that. I instantly do it. It's unconscious. I have been programmed. I have been told at an early age, don't touch the stove, it's hot. You don't have to tell me that anymore. When I learned at 16 years old how to drive, I don't have to get in a car today, 40 years later, and pick up the manual and learn how to drive. It just is automatic. Let me tell you how automatic it is that when we're driving, how many of you, when you were working in the offices, you would go to work and come home the same way every day? You had a routine. And guess what? There are times, if you think about it, there are times where you got home from the office, got home and didn't even know how you got home. Seriously, because when you do something over and over again, a rote routine, it becomes automatic. Your brain just fills in the information. You don't even have to think about it. That's how biases are formed. We learn about people. We learn it. Look, here's the thing, and I'm just going to say this because it's a true reality. The more and more you listen and watch certain news stations, you're being fed certain information and you believe that message. That frames your world view. It frames the way you think. It frames the way you see certain people based on what you constantly hear. So in some of my work, for example, when I work with a lot of leadership teams and we're working on doing some long-term cultural competence building and helping them to address some of their biases, sometimes some of the exercises that I will have them do is I will say, if you are used to watching MSNBC and CNN constantly, I'm going to ask you for 48 hours to not watch that at all, but turn to Fox. And then I'm going to ask you, if all you ever watch is Fox, I'm going to ask you to, for 48 hours, turn it over. And let me see how many shoes you throw at the TV. And then let me see how many cuss words you have, right? All kinds of reactions. But it's because what we have been, what we hear, what we've been fed for so long, it becomes programmed. You ever listen to a song when you were driving to work and you got to the office and you were humming the song still? Again, that's how unconscious biases are formed. How many of you have ever rode on Southwest Airlines? Yeah, I think we've all rode on Southwest Airlines, and certainly I have too. And so, you know, on Southwest Airlines, they do not do assigned seats. You have to check in. If you want to get in zone A and zone B, you got to check in early, as soon as 24 hours before the flight hits. So there's been a couple of times I was too busy, totally forgot about it, didn't check in on time, and guess where I ended up? Zone C62. Let me tell you how our biases play out every day. So I'm coming in on the plane now. Everybody on zone 8 and got into the seats. They got into where they sit at. They're going to sit at the aisle seats, sit at the window seats, and sit up front. And then zone B, same thing. They didn't finish up the rest of the seats. So now I'm coming in zone C. I've got to walk through this curtain here. And guess what? My biases are playing out in everyday life. So in 2 to 3 seconds, as I'm walking in and coming down this hall, coming down this aisle, I have to, in 2 to 3 seconds, look and see who I want to sit beside or who I don't want to sit beside. I got to make quick, snap decisions. And guess what? I'm being biased because I truly decide I don't want to sit beside certain people because of what I've been taught, because of what I heard, and because of what I experienced. It's my reality. I don't want to sit beside someone with a baby, right? I say a crying baby. They could be a really good baby. What if they don't cry? How many of you have ever been on a flight where the baby cried all 6 hours? Yep. And then how many of you been on more flights where they didn't cry at all? But why do we, though, when we get on this plane and walk down this aisle, how many of y'all gonna say, I don't want to sit beside nobody with a baby? Because I don't care if it happened 100 times that the baby didn't cry. That 1 or 2 times that you had that experience and it wasn't a good experience, your brain doesn't forget it. What if you had a bad experience with someone who looks a certain way from a certain identity group? You have a bias, it's formed, and you can't unsee it, right? So this is our reality. We may not want to sit beside someone who's really, really huge and probably will be over your seat. You probably don't want to sit beside someone that is eating. I hear a lot of times people will say that because their food is smelling. They don't want to sit beside someone. I heard them say, I want to sit beside someone that's talkative. And I'm like, how do you walk down the aisle and see if they talkative or not? Looking at them, right? So we make up this stuff in our head because it's like, I already know what that looks like because I've seen it before, but that's not the reality. Look, we have what we call schemas. Schemas are these biases or these lenses, these frameworks that we use to interpret information. It's a pattern of thoughts and behaviors. All of us have a schema in which we see the world. Now, here's the reality. Some of our schemas are like this. Meaning that if you grew up in a very, very small town, small community of 1,000 people, and everybody kind of knew each other, and that's how you grew up. When you leave that community and go out into the bigger world, the global world, this is kind of what your worldview will look like. Do you see what I'm doing? What am I doing?
Very narrow.
Yes, yes.
Tunnel vision.
Very, what was it?
Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision, very narrowly focused. Not that it's wrong, it's just your world, but it's the way you see the world. So how many of you grew up in America, but you have traveled outside of the US and you've gone to other countries that have different norms, different values, different practices? They even drive on a different side of the road. And I remember the very first time I left the US and I went to another country and they were driving on a different side of the road. I didn't say it was different. I said, oh my God, they're driving on the wrong side of the road. It was my lens wrong. It was wrong because it's from my point of view. So I want us to think about our lenses, and this is the way we see the world. We have these different expectations, these hypotheses, these stereotypes of characteristics about people who we don't know, we've not had exposure to. And so we have to expose ourselves to people, to cultures, to experiences that we haven't had before, because the more we do that, we take our framework from this to building a much broader, bigger worldview, experience level. And guess what that allows us to do? To be more sensitive, to allow us to understand differences, to not judge it, but to say, wow, I can see where you're coming from. I've learned since I've traveled to and worked in 36 countries, I have learned how to adapt, how to flex. I've learned that if I'm going to South America and they say the meeting starts at 10, they meant 10-ish. Don't mean it's going to be 10 o'clock. Somewhere around 11:30, the meeting is going to start. I've learned that. I've learned that when I go to Asia, that I don't go there to immediately start talking business and try to get the contract signed. No, I got to build relationships and talk about the family and go out to dinner before I start talking about business. I've got to ask about their families and how the relationships are, how they're doing. And I've got to show a personal interest, right? I've learned those things. I've learned that when people ask you to go out to dinner at 8 and 9 o'clock, which is some of their cultures, that's about my bedtime. So I've learned now that when I go to specific countries where they want to eat much later, I'll take a nap and don't eat, and then make sure that I'm ready to go when they go out to eat at 8, 9 o'clock. So you have to learn some of those. How do you make these shifts even in your audiences? They think different. They believe different. They see the world differently. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to ask you to take a look at this picture. If you've done this exercise before, I'm going to ask you to just observe. What do you see in this picture? Just write down or tell me what you see. And Kim, if you don't mind, in the chat box, give me a time check. Time check, okay? What do you see in this picture? Just take a stab at it. I know it's something you may not have seen before. Okay, let me see what y'all are saying that you see. All right, someone says, I can't make it out. Puzzle pieces. It's a map. It's a picture from above the earth. Okay, all right, good. Anybody else? All right, I see another map. So how come, oh, someone says blotches of black and gray. Someone says they see a man. Okay, good. And Kim, am I still to end at 10:30, at 9:30, right? 10:30, I'm sorry. Yep, someone says Abe Lincoln laying down. Someone says fabric. Another person says fabric. Okay, all right, interesting. Someone says very good, Jackie. All right, so this is what we're seeing here. Now, that's interesting. This is work that was done by a social psychologist by the name of Dr. Carl Dallenbach, and it's called perceptual organization. See, what happens, and this is about our biases and how our brains function. When you haven't seen something before, your brain is trying to look for familiarity, for patterns, for what it knows, what it's seen before. So you're making out things and your brain is, oh, that might look like a man. I think that's a piece of fabric. Oh, that's a map. Because you really don't know what it is. So guess what? Your brain is making up stuff and filling in the information. Doesn't make it true, but it's from your worldview. And do you see how many different types of perspectives people have? No one sees the thing that it really is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you and superimpose the picture now. And I'm going to ask you to now tell me what you see. How many of you see a cow? There's the nostril right there. You go up and you'll see the eyes right there, and then the ears. How many of you now see that? You see that cow? So what Dr. Dallenbach says is that when we have been exposed to new information, that now is like our brains are like a computer, it files it away into a folder. And then see, like, well, you've had experience with fabric before, you've seen fabric, or someone says Abe Lincoln, or someone says a map. Those are things you've been exposed to before, you're familiar with. Now that you've seen this, I'm going to remove this superimposition and go back to the original picture. And I want you to then tell me if you see this cow. Back to the original picture. Is the cow pretty obvious to you there? Yeah. So now what I want you to do is tell me, how does this relate to your everyday life and bias and your brains? Alana, I see you coming on. You coming on?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, because I'm sitting here laughing. I'm like, now I can't unsee the cow.
Yes,
and so it's like
it.
once you see, you can't unsee it once you've been exposed.
Yes. What if your exposure or experience with someone from a certain group? Sometimes when we have an experience with someone from a certain group, then if we're not careful, our biases will kick in and then we universalize it.
Right.
We generalize it. All of those millennials, right? Let's say you did have a bad experience with a millennial. Let's say one of your worst bosses was a Black woman. Now, what is going to be your bias from now on into other positions? What if you had a bad relationship breakup and he just he broke your heart? Your partner broke your heart. Someone else comes along and has a couple of traits, has a couple of little behaviors that remind you. Sometimes you'll say, you know what, it's just something about her that just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know what it is, but I can't put my finger on it. Guess what you're having? You're having that moment where you couldn't unsee that cow. It's something about that person. There's a familiarity. We do this all the time. We may be isolating people. We may be judging people, holding people to a standard that they didn't even deserve to be held to. I see this happen a lot, even in the workplace, when someone has dropped the ball, they didn't get the results on time, missed the deadline, just are like oil and water, and with the leader and the person, they just don't work, they don't get along. And guess what? That person then comes into the performance review conversation, and then they'll say, I'm just use Kim as an example. I'm gonna tell you what, Kim just drops the ball. She's not really dependable at all. I just can't trust her, but we are totally different. We just don't see eye to eye. And I really didn't spend any time really getting to know Kim. So everything I see from her is negative. Mm-hmm. Kim, 6 months later, now, after that manager has shared that information about Kim, 6 months later, Kim goes and posts in another position in another part of the company. And I remember that conversation. But what if it was the leader who had biases, the leader who had those stereotypes, the leaders who just had a bad experience with a Black leader in the past, and Kim happened to be a Black woman, and nothing she could do was right because their blind spots were already there. That can happen. So we have learned rules. We have a schema that's formed, our framework or our lenses in which we see the world. And we then are the sum total of what we are today. That's our background of our learned rules, what you learned growing up, how they were reinforced. They created and formed a framework and the lenses in which we see the world. And now this is our background. This has shaped who we are. And so we see the world as we are rather than the way the world is. Let me say that again, that's tweetable. We see the world the way we are rather than the way the world is. And guess what? The reality is we believe the way that we see the world is true, is factual, and everybody else should see it the way I see it because I'm right. Sometimes we don't want to go back and challenge the messages that we heard that could be inaccurate, that could be wrong. So the brain is malleable. What does that mean that the brain is malleable? Thank you, Stephanie. I saw that. Yeah. Yes. I saw all of that, right? Yes, the brain is flexible. The brain is programmable. Yes, the brain can be taught, can be reprogrammed. So here's my last poll, and then I'll close it out with some strategies, some things for us to think about. How many pieces of information can the brain absorb at one time? Put it in the chat box. Is it A, 10 to 20, B, 30 to 40, C, 40 to 50, D, 60 to 70, or over 100, E? What do you say? All right, so I'm seeing over 100.
Over 100.
Okay, anyone else? E, over 100. I'm waiting for a couple more responses. What do you say, E? 10 to 20, don't be Googling it. Just put it on in there. So let me move on to the next one while they're coming in. So I do see 2 responses there. Now, we have 11 million pieces of information. I see someone else says 10 to 20. Thank you for putting that in. So 11 million pieces of information at any given time. That's what's exposed to us. So think about now, we've been together for over an hour. Right. And so you got all these different things going on, not only all the things that's in your home, the things that you're looking at here, the things that you're hearing me say, all of this information, 11 million pieces of information. When I say that, I'm talking about everything from every tile in your house to every piece of color in your carpet. Those are things, million pieces of things at your disposal at one time. They have to go through what we call perceptions, right? How do you perceive it? And you're perceiving it from your own lens, from your own schema, your own framework. And you are making interpretations or assessments and judgments about it. But then you also, again, it's got to go through what we call these preferences and then selective attention. Ultimately, what we have to recognize is that our brains just do not have the capacity to be able to pull all this in at one time. Did somebody Google it and find the right answer? All right, the right answer is only 40 to 50. The right answer is C. Out of 11 million pieces of information, 40 to 50 pieces of information is all that our brain can really absorb at one time. Now, what does that mean? It means we are missing a lot of information. And it means that our brains do not have the capacity to look at things in a bigger, broader sense. We could be missing a lot. So what do we need to do then? If we know that this is the case, that out of all this information that's out there, and we only have the capacity to process and interpret 40 to 50 at a time, what do we need to do with that big gap there? Surround yourself with people who think different than you and get various perspectives so that what you can't see, someone else can. You know what, going back to the cow exercise, that people see the cow. I've done this all over the world. Rarely do people see the cow. Now, when I'm in India, they see the cow, right? Because when you're in India, cows are walking all over the street. So they see that. That's a part of their visual. That's a part of their world, their lenses. So that's a different part for them. Anyone who grew up on a farm may have seen the cow, easier to see it. But I was doing this done it for a lot of groups, but there was one particular group where they were a bunch of architects. Right? And they see textures and fabrics and patterns and all of that. Well, one person out of over 100 leaders saw the cow. Nobody else saw the cow. Now we were live and in person, face to face. No one else saw the cow. So what I did was I said, okay, then we got all of these, they had fabric up there. They had all kinds of things. They had two ladies talking. They had people on a park bench. They had, that looks like the map of Africa, all kinds of stuff. But there was a one common theme. So many people said they saw a map, and some people saw this, most of them saw canvases and maps. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, let's take a vote. Let's take a vote. How many of you in here see the cow? Just that one hand went up. How many of you in here see fabric? A lot more of the hands went up. How many of you in here see a map? Most of the hands went up. I said, so the right answer then, if we have to make a choice today, is a map. They said yes. So my point to you, ladies and gentlemen, is the right answer may be in the room, but it may not come from the majority. The right answer may be in the room. And I'm saying this too. Think about, for example, you in a meeting. I have a team of 12 people. I have some millennials on my team. I've got baby boomers in my team as well. Just because you have the majority rule, the majority vote, doesn't mean it's right. The right answer was in the room that day, and they missed it. What if that was a particular product and someone had the right answer, but the majority of them had the wrong answer, and they spent millions of dollars on a marketing campaign that could cost them? I worked at Capital One. Back in the day, I worked at Capital One, and we were doing a lot of marketing when it came out that more and more women were making more of the financial decisions in the household. So we came up with lifestyle credit cards. There was an all-male branding marketing team, and they came up with this marketing campaign that cost over $900 million. Did you hear me say it was all male, trying to attract a female market? It blew up. Cost them millions of dollars. Not that they couldn't have came and asked the women's network group, not that they couldn't come and ask a lot of the women executives, women senior leaders, put a women's pilot group together. They didn't, because all of them thought it was such a fabulous idea. They all agreed, but they were all wrong. So let's recognize that we all do have these blind spots. I'm going to give you some strategies for how you can really manage your blind spots and again, create more culturally sensitive presentations. So the first thing, and you'll have this as a handout, I've given this to Kim, and she's gonna make it available. First of all, it starts with self, right? Starting with self and recognizing and acknowledging that we all have our own biases. So I would encourage you, if we want to know what our biases are, there's some great resources out there. One I would encourage you to take is the implicit association test, the IAT. It is created by Harvard University's business school, been around for years and years and decades actually, and they have been doing it with, you can look at your race bias, gender bias, religion bias. You can look at LGBTQ. They've got all kinds of ones on different religions. They have 20 or 30 different ones. They're free. Did I say they're free? They are free. I don't get paid any kickbacks. I just encourage my clients, take the IAT so that you know where your biases are most pervasive, because you need to understand then how that could potentially play out in the way you interact, the way you make decisions, and certainly for us, how we build our presentations. So the implicit association test is good. Also, I would say pay attention to the feedback and to the comments that may come from attendees, from clients, and from colleagues. Very, very valuable. I've learned a lot just listening to my colleagues, because I'll say to them, I'm still open to learning. And if I say something that's insensitive, I want to know. I want you to tell me privately, tell me separately, but I do want to know so that for me, I am becoming more informed. I also encourage you to practice intellectual humility. Who knows what that is? What's intellectual humility?
Admitting that you don't know everything.
That's it right there. Yes, Jackie, admitting that you don't know everything. So recognizing that the things you believe in, that they might in fact be wrong, that there may be another option, that may be a different perspective. Be willing to turn some of your exclamation points into question marks. Can I say that again? Be willing to turn some of your exclamation points into question marks. The third strategy I would encourage you to do is to bust your bubble. What do I mean by that? Bust your bubble. Yes, Alice. I love it. She got it. Alice did this.
I said, get over it.
That was good. Yes, bust your bubble by expanding your network and expanding yourself to others, exposing yourself to others, expanding who you hang around with, who is in your circle. I always say, if you look at the 5 closest people to you and you're the smartest one in your group is too small. You need to look at your network. How diverse is your network? And I'm not just talking about race and gender and age, but I'm also talking about experience and background and levels of success and wealth and where they come from and what they do. That's how I have become as successful as I have expanded my worldview by expanding my network into a global world network, learning about people, learning about their language, learning about their culture, being able to ask questions, being willing to learn, being willing to be wrong. Yes, so bust your bubble. Another couple of strategies: say the silent part out loud. This is important. Say it out loud. Read your presentations out loud. Read your speeches out loud so that you can hear it. And I'm a big believer too, is if you can get someone, a trusted advisor, to allow you to say it to them, to present it to them and get some feedback. And also too, I've had people, again, say, look at my presentation and tell me where I may have some blind spots in here, right? So it's okay to do that, to ask for help and to get some feedback. And the last 2 is, again, don't defend, don't object, and don't justify. If you happen to say something that's insensitive, that's incendiary, or you write something that is offensive to someone else and they bring it to your attention, or you catch yourself, please don't get defensive. Please don't try to marginalize it. Please don't try to justify and rationalize it and explain it away. Really, what you want to do is say thank you. You want to be grateful and accept the responsibility, accept the correction, and be willing to make the adjustment. And of course, I love this one. Stay in your lane. Right? This one is really key and critical. When I'm talking about staying in your lane, this is about, again, as we look at the current events, I don't care even if things are changing and the world around us is changing. If you're not necessarily the expert in that, don't try to become the expert now just because everybody is talking about it. It's a hot topic and now there's a lot of money to be made. Can I tell you the number of people who reached out to me whenever the murder of George Floyd happened and the world started focusing on greater equity and more inclusion, and focusing on justice and building cultures of inclusion and all of that, the number of speakers that would come to me and want to do it. And I'm like, what were you doing before this happened? What were you talking about before this happened? If you are focusing on sales, stay in your lane. If your area is on communication skills, stay in your lane. If your focus is on leadership, stay in your lane. If you have not been talking about a particular topic, please don't start talking about it simply because it is expedient to you financially. If it's not your area of expertise, it can cost you business, because when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're talking about things that are attached to federal laws. You're talking about things that have country laws attached to them. You're talking about companies that can go, they can go viral because of a bad, like I was sharing with you earlier, some bad advice that's been given. And so I appreciate some of my speaker friends who did come to me and they say, look, Dr. Davis, I don't know anything about this stuff. I can tell a few of my stories about what it is to be a woman or be a person of color or but I can't give them strategies about how they can address harassment, bullying. You know, what do you say to someone who's, just said some microaggression, and I don't even know what binary means. I don't even know what cisgender means, right? So when you start getting into that kind of stuff, be sensitive and careful so that you don't expose a client to a lawsuit or to an embarrassment. So stay in your lane and continue to work towards the things that for you work best for you. I talked about the Project Implicit Association Test. Here is the URL that you can use. You can certainly Google it too, Implicit Association Test Harvard. It'll come up and you can go in and take as many of those as you want. So I want to make sure too, I leave you with a couple of other recommended readings to identify your blind spots and to really become more culturally competent and culturally sensitive speakers, presenters, coaches, and consultants. I love Malcolm Gladwell's book on Blink. I love Daniel Kahneman's book on Thinking Fast and Slow, because where our biases are designed is in our fast brain. Fast brain are the things that we automatically do every day, all day. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to focus. But we need to use our slow brain more and more and more. Be more mindful, be more thoughtful, be more analytical, be more intentional. And when we do that, we tend to make less biased decisions because you second guess your first impression. You second guess your first assessments and judgments. And then blind spots is another great one. Dr. Banaja Mahazarin is really a good professor, and Anthony Greenwald, they're professors at Harvard, and then Howard Ross is another great thought leader on those. So I'm going to stop it there, be right on time. Thank you so much for this very, very first session. I want you to, again, make sure you stay connected with me. If you want to take some of your learning to another level, even beyond just blind spots and unconscious bias, and become more inclusive, I've got a great, great course on LinkedIn Learning. Please take that as well, too, and it will give you even more strategies and statistics and research and data on how to cultivate, again, more inclusive presentations and the ways that we do things. And I would absolutely love, love, love it today if you would also support a sister and pre-order my new book that's coming out called Living Beyond What If. Yes, 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 we all have what ifs. We all have what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't have enough money? What if nobody like me? What if I get rejected? And what if I don't get a standing ovation? All of these what ifs that keeps our dreams on delay, and that keeps us procrastinating, keeps us living in fear. So I'm talking about the journey. I'm talking about the story, the process that I went through to get beyond my what if. And today I'm living my best life and then becoming a better version of myself. So I want to thank you again for your time today. And I know that we're going to take a quick break, but if there's any questions, I certainly will stay around so that you can ask any questions that you may have as well. But thank you so much. You've been a wonderful, wonderful morning, audience. I so appreciate your engagement. And I hope that I've shared some things, to practical things that will help you build more culturally sensitive presentations and make sure that you're aware of those blind spots that can cost you business.
All right, Dr. Shirley, thank you so much for that. It's great to be reminded of the stuff that some of us may think we know, but it's those difficult things about ourselves that we have to confront and address. So you helped us to do that. So thank you for that. We're going to take a short break so everyone can have coffee, stand up, move around. It's 10:30. We'll come back at 10:45, 11:45, Dr. Shirley's time. And for a second half, I'm super excited about what else is coming. I was going to mention about your new book, but thank you for giving us those resources because that'll help us to reinforce what we're learning today. So we appreciate you. And if there's nothing else, we'll take a short break and I'll see you guys back in about 15 minutes. See, I did it there, you guys. I will see you back.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Kim. Yeah, and they know in the second half, I'm going to be now talking about how you translate all that stuff now and building 7-figure business. I'm going to talk about some of all the different revenue streams that I've been able to generate even over the last year. So looking forward to it. All right, everyone. See you soon.
I'll see you in a minute.
This opportunity. We're going to pivot pretty easily. I wanted to spend the first part talking about our blind spots and recognizing that as the world changes, so must our presentation, so must our styles. And we have to be real sensitive to that and become culturally competent and recognize that we do have our blind spots. So I hope that that was helpful, even if it was a reminder and a refresher for some of you as well. But you can't make a lot of money if you're getting clients that are offended, or if you have people in the audience that feel like it's insensitive. It will hurt your brand. So now what I want to do is move to the next part of this, which is truly in the midst of all of the challenges that we've had to deal with in a very, very disruptive way over the last year, is how do we reinvent our businesses so that we can truly have, as I say, amazing and sustainable success. Before I do that, though, I do want to be sensitive that I have a question in the chat box that was sent to me privately, but I do think it's worth sharing with everyone. I don't give the name. When someone give it to me privately, I just ask the question. So it says, thank you for this wonderful presentation. How do you deal with resistance, especially in a corporate environment or a business unit? Some people do not want to change, and we see evidence of that every day. Oh, yes, we do. Absolutely. And here's the reality, and I'm going to hit on this a little bit when I talk about change. Not everybody likes change, and not everybody is willing to change, especially when they see that some of the change that may be happening may, for example, challenge their power, their position, their privilege. It may even be something for them that just goes against what they believe. In those situations, I always tell leaders, because that's one of the common questions I get too is, well, Dr. Davis, we just have so many people who feel like that this is a conversation we don't need to be having. Our culture is great. Our leaders feel like they're effective. And I'm like, okay. So when I talk to the staff, it's a very, very different picture, right? So leaders always think they're much better, more effective, and more inclusive than they really are. But I also too think that we have to be okay with recognizing that there's an 80-20 rule. 80% of the people really want to do the right thing. They really want to learn more. They want to develop. They want to grow. They don't mind being pushed. There's 20% that just will not. So just like this past week, I was talking to a CEO and we were doing an actual meet and greet because I'm getting ready to keynote to his big, large healthcare company. And one of the things he said was, he said, Dr. Davis, I am perfectly okay if you let people know that the direction that we're taking, the fact that we're focusing on trying to be a much more inclusive culture, that if this isn't something that people feel like for them is aligned with their personal values, they have our permission to find another job, another career, another position at another company. So you have to be okay with recognizing that when you're making this shift and this change, that not everybody will want to go, but you do have to hold people accountable to the values, hold people accountable to what the expectations are. And to the extent that they don't want to live that or to display that, then you'll have to make a different decision. One of the other people jumped in on that meeting and they loved that. And they were like, Dr. Davis, I was looking at one of your videos and you got to say this in your speech. If you can't change the people, change the people. Let me say that again. That's tweetable. If you can't change the people, change the people. And that's what been one of my mantras, especially in OD. I've been an organizational development consultant from a lot of my HR career as well. And we had to go through a lot of change. We recognize that only wet babies like change, but we had to do it because it was the right thing to do for the company. You got to stay relevant. You got to be sustainable. You got to maintain your level of competitiveness. And so you have to make change and people cannot stay the same. That's why it's important to reinvent yourself. So you will have some resistance, but I always am able to go back to the business case, why this is important, how it's going to help your business, how it's going to help each of you be better, how it's going to help you lead and work more effectively across borders, across differences, across corporations, corporate settings, all of that. So it's a win-win for us all who want it. Don't focus your time on the 20, focus your time on the 80. Okay? Great. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen because I want to now talk a bit about how do we master this art of reinventing our businesses, and how many do you know that you can't reinvent your business if you don't reinvent yourself first? So let me tell you something. I have been through this. Most of my life has been about, accepting life's challenges and sometimes the setbacks and dealing with the tests and dealing with the trials and just having to learn that for me, there are things that happen in life I can't control. But I also recognize too that there's three kinds of people: those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that wonder what happened. I also recognize too that life is not what happens to you. Life is what you do with what happens to you. So I have had to learn how to master the art of reinventing myself, to take life by the horns, and that when things do happen, even as one of my mentors used to say, when things go wrong, don't go with them. I had to learn how to do some of those things. So I want to talk to you today about that. Let's first recognize that as we reinvent our businesses and we reinvent ourselves, that we are definitely living in an era of disruption. We're living in a VUCA world. A VUCA world is a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This is the reality of our world. Things are changing. We're just now coming out of, and yet we're not completely out of the woods, but we're in 3 pandemics. Yes, the global healthcare was a pandemic. Yes, the pandemic of racism and inequities and inequalities and greater needs for greater justice and greater inclusion. That's a pandemic. We have a pandemic of the global economy making these shifts. And some of it, again, we had a double-digit unemployment. People lost their jobs and now they're having to get back into a new normal, right? And so this is our reality. And so I recognize that as the world continues to be disrupted and things change, that we have to innovate, We have to be resilient. We got to have, agility. We got to be flexible. We got to recognize that this couldn't be a more important time for us to truly shift and become better versions of ourselves and to reinvent our businesses so that they can grow. How many of you would say that through the pandemic, you learned some things about yourself? Yes, 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 and amen. Learn some things about yourself, because here's the reality. When you're stuck in a house and you become more isolated, you have nothing else to do but to look in the mirror, right? And to do some soul searching. I had the opportunity to do that more so than ever before. And the reason why I didn't get to do it as much before is because I was always on the road. I was always going. Yes, I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm passionate about it and I'm having impact. But at the same time, I wasn't having as much time as I would have liked to have sat down and wrote out more of my goals and dreams for the future, right? I'm already now in the prime of my life, but hey, I say the rest of my life is going to be the best of my life. And I still got a long way to go. I still got some more things that I'm excited about. So it gave me a chance to truly take inventory, to truly do some assessing and to do some reflecting and some personal soul searching. And I hope you did the same thing too. Look, we're middle, as I said, the 3 C's: accelerated change, overwhelming complexity, and increased competition. That means all of us have to shift and pivot. If you are the same person you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, shame on you. You are missing an opportunity to grow better, to be better, to do better, to think bigger. And that's what I want to talk about today. Look, life is all about defining moments. How many of you would say, yes, this past year were some defining moments? How many of you would say March the 12th and the 13th were some defining moments when you started to see your business literally almost crumble because all things were getting canceled, rescheduled, postponed, all kinds of things were happening that were outside of your control? How did you respond? Let me ask you the question, and you can come on off of mute, or you can put it in the chat box. What did you do on March the 12th and the 13th when all hell started breaking loose and it was a true threat to your financial stability in your business? What were some of the things you all did? What was your immediate reactions? Let's see what we got here in the chat. And come on again, if you want to come on mute as well too. Someone says, yep, I prayed. Yes, someone else says, I prayed and then I got creative. Yes, yes, yes. What else? Yep, I did that. I prayed, I cried, I cussed. I was like, oh my God, I was doing all kinds of, for me, it was a shock. It was scary. I was starting to fear. It's like, oh my God, everything I have built, all of the sacrifices I have made, I'm seeing it go up in smoke. That was just my initial reaction. Someone says I put in a new plan. I put a new plan in place. Yes, after the initial shock. How many of y'all did have some initial shock? Yeah, we all had some initial shock. And yes, you immediately then start reacting and responding. And some in a positive way, some in a not so positive way. Yes, so I was doing all of those. Oh my God, oh my God. And I was praying and I was screaming. And then, yes, then you start to get creative. I had to calm down. But look, change is inevitable in life. This is a part of life. And we have to recognize that in life with change happening, that you have a choice. You can certainly, as I said too, misery is optional. Change is inevitable, but misery is optional, and so is defeat. So you can make a choice that you're going to be one of those people that make things happen and not one of those people that watch things happen, or one of those people where change happened to me. And I didn't take any control. I did not take back my power. I did not become better as a result of it. So when we think about change, let's talk a little bit about the psychology of change. I love this book. Now, I told you I'm an OD consultant as well. My PhD is in business and organizational leadership. So I've studied this stuff just, here, there, left, right, up, down, in every which way. And I have had to lead change in a number of organizations, lead teams through projects. I had to lead people through change. I had to lead companies through mergers and acquisitions. Having worked in banking, we did nothing but there was an acquisition or there was a merger every couple of years. So change is something that we all have to deal with. Change is something that happens to people even if they don't agree with the change. But here's the difference. There's a difference between change and transition. Transition, on the other hand, is internal. That's how we respond to change, right? So how do we respond and step up and stand up in the midst of the change that we're having to go through? Change can happen very quickly, while transaction usually happens slower. So here's the book that I love, 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 and I do a lot of work out of this. It's called Managing Transitions. How do you make the most of change? And it's by William Bridges. He did a lot of great work in this area around transitions and how do we manage change. So I do a lot of work on change management. And when I talk about cultural transformation, that's exactly what it is. It is about change, organizational change. And so we recognize that people don't like to go through change, but everyone experiences a change curve. This is the change curve. How many of you seen this before? This change curve. So what this says is that in our lives, how many of you know that there are necessary endings? How many of you know that sometimes things will happen in life that we don't have control over and it just ends? How many of you have ever been in a relationship that it ended? Some of mine, thank you, God, I've been in some relationships and they were necessary endings. And I thank God for them today. That those relationships now taught me some things, but I'm so glad I walked away from some of those that were not healthy and helping to me. So in those relationships, in those situations, when we go through these endings, right, that's a time too where we have to go through reconciliation. You have to get right with it. Check out the number of people that we lost over the past year. Over 500,000 people. We lost them. Loved ones, friends, colleagues. I just went to a funeral just 2 weeks ago of a very young 43-year-old vibrant man with a family, young child, and he was lost to COVID. And again, obviously for me, it was a hard pill to swallow that someone so young, so vibrant could lose their life to that. And I think we all had to experience some of that. Endings, jobs. Have you ever been on a job and you lost your job? You ever been on a contract and the client canceled the contract, an ending? You ever been in you've been in the hospital where you see people, there's a whole ward of people who didn't make it, endings. But even when you are inside of the workplace, inside of the marketplace, there's endings. And let me tell you something. Endings are okay. Endings are a part of life. Endings can be very positive. But when we have these immediate changes that happen to us, even as we think about over the last year, we went through some change. So think about when you've had a change happen, whether it was an ending of a relationship, ending of a life, someone you lost that you loved, ending of a career in a particular area or a job, ending even of, for me, I had to end even some financial partnerships that I've had. You go through these things of denial, shock, fear, anger. So think about how you move through this curve. The important piece is do not stay stuck over in denial. Do not stay stuck in anxiety. It's a part of life. It is a part of the transition. Everyone goes through it, but people are on a different place in their change curves. So look at the middle part of that, which is exploration. This is where too, like my initial was shock, anger, oh my God, yes, and even panic. And then I immediately start moving through this change curve. Okay, I started looking at, okay, what can we do? How can we pivot? How can we shift? How can I reinvent, right? I'm the master of reinvention. Now I've got to take my team through this reinvention. And my goal was not to have to lay anyone off, but to try to figure out ways that we could now use them to be more creative, to build more content, to now let's start looking at things that didn't work in our business. Let's start ending some of the products or services that haven't sold as well. Go through that process. So I'm reorienting them. I'm reorienting myself to this new normal, this new reality. Now I've got a virtualized business that I didn't necessarily intend to have this fast, this much, but now we're there. And so I'm recommitting. I am reestablishing. It's a new beginning. It's a new reality, a new normal for us as well. So I'm going to ask you, where are you at currently on this change curve? Obviously, you worked through some things over the last year, but where would you say right now you are? Are you at A in endings and reconciliation? Are you at B in the exploration and reorientation? Or are you at C, new beginnings and recommitment? Just put A, B, or C in the chat box. Where are you? Okay, recommitment, good. Recommitment, good. Someone else says they're at exploration. Anybody else? Who are you? Okay, good. Again, new beginnings, recommitment. All right, great. Yeah, and that's what we'll find too. Oftentimes that when we've worked through some of this change, even if we don't understand it, even if we couldn't control it, you got to now start to look at ways that we can move past it, ways that we can now leverage it. What can we learn from it? So thank you again for sharing that, because I know we are all at different places in our development. But again, think about too, one word that describes your current emotional state on the transition curve. So many of you said, I'm at the beginning, new beginnings and recommitment. So are you now at creativity? Are you now at energy? Right? Where are you? If you look at some of the words here on the change curve as well, where are you? Are you at enthusiasm? Impatience, hope, passion, where are you? So I'm saying hopeful, impatience, yep, hope, acceptance, good. And so from my presentation today, where do you think I'm at? How would you describe mine over in my recommitment and new beginnings? I can tell you where mine is. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of energy. Yes, yes, yes. So I have moved through this change curve, and now I'm on the next chapter. I'm in the new season and the next level of my life and of my career. I'm really excited. So this isn't just made up today for the sake of presenting. This is truly who I am. So I hope you feel my authenticity there as well. But I had to move through this process because in life, we all have these setbacks. This is what life is all about. See, and I know too, my friend and he's a friend and colleague, and everybody knows Dr. Willie Jolly, right? So he talked about, a setback is a setup for a comeback. But in life, we do have these setbacks and we have these disappointments and we have things that happen to us that we can't control. But guess what? What you can control is how you respond to it. We got to keep moving forward. And we also have to remain resilient, relevant. We got to be marketable, and we got to remain flexible. Relevant meaning now is a time too, where as things have shifted, now people are working more virtually, they're working remotely. Yes, people are much more hyper-connected. You had to become more relevant in your business and start to learn platforms that you had never necessarily been working on before. You had to become more relevant in that you had to digitize some of your content. If you did not have a business model that you were able to do any presentations, coaching, consulting online at all, then you were probably irrelevant. But hopefully you made the pivot, made the shift, and now you're on the other side of the change. You're more relevant now. Have you been resilient? Not only in your business, but personally, it starts with us first. Your business can't be resilient if you aren't. So we've been learning, and that's become like the 2020 word of the year is resilience and agility, right? How do you be resilient? And a lot of that is how do you bounce back? See, life is not about knocking you down, because if you can look up, you can get up. Thank you, Les Brown, right? When life knocks you down, if you can look up, you can get up. It's not about staying down, and it's not about falling down, because we all fall down. We just have to bounce back up. And then you got to be marketable, remain marketable. So yes, that might mean you had to change your business model, change your strategy around how you do some of your communications. How do you engage? How you're now leveraging your CRM differently, but you still got to remain marketable. How do you remain marketable? You remain relevant. You start to take some of your content and use the things that people are struggling with and start to be the solution to their problems. Be the aspirin to their pain, right? Be the answer to all of their questions. That's what we have to do. Be marketable and be out there, be visible where people can see you, where they can find you. You have to be findable. You have to be relatable. Yes, you have to be, even when people are out there, they want to know too, that what you're going through, the same thing you're willing to share, because they're going through it too. And we got to be flexible. So that's why I wrote this book, Reinventing Yourself. It was really all about how do you ensure that you redefine success, looking at how do you redefine your purpose and reassess your vision, looking at how do you reprioritize your goal, retool your communication skills, how you're marketing yourself, your visibility, your brand, how are you rebuilding your career, and how are you reevaluating relationships, the redo, repivot, reestablish your financial plan. All of us had to do that, and certainly regain our personal power. And that's where I'm at now. I had to go through this process all over again. had to do all of these things. So now what I want to walk you through is some of these strategies for as you reinvent yourself, they should then spill over into your business. So how did you redefine your business? Let me stop there. And I want to ask you that question. What things did you do to redefine your business model? Where are you at today with that? So let me get someone to either share some of the things you did. How has your business been redefined? You can put it in the chat or you can also come on. Good. Someone says, I embraced technology. Well, thanks, Rob. Rob has to pull out. No problem. Thank you. It's been wonderful to have you here. Appreciate you. Someone else was going to share. Was that you, Kim?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually started doing something that I should have been doing all along. My background is television. So I started doing more media training, and it's like the thing that I should always be doing because it's a natural for me. Mm-hmm. And so I stepped into that. So that was good.
Absolutely. And some of us pull some things out of our backgrounds, out of our hats that we should have been doing, hadn't been doing, and they were adding value. So yeah, we were able to, now we had some time to truly now start to make those adjustments. Someone else says better sales systems. Good, Alana, a better sales system. Good. Because some of those things we've been putting off, right? We've been delaying. It's like, one day I'm gonna get to it, I'm gonna get to it, I'm gonna get to it. Just didn't have time. And now we had some time to do those things. Someone else says, I got help to do what I spent time on, but shouldn't. Good. Yeah, we all had to do that as well too. Excellent. Thank you for sharing some of those. So we had to redefine what does success look like in our lives, but certainly what can success look like in our business? And definitely it may look different, but I hope for many of you, it did look different. Meaning that you want to make sure too, you're thinking about what's your what else, what's your what next, right? You can't cry over the spilled milk. You can't change what happened with the pandemic and all the economic shift that happened, but now use this time to say, what is my next? What else can I do? Who else can I become? What skill sets do I need? What mindsets do I need to adopt and develop? What approaches now can I take? What practices should I now integrate into my business? And so I am a big believer as you reinvent your business that you got to observe some of the road signs of life. There's plenty of them, but let me give you a couple of examples. Especially in my business, right? There were a couple of things I realized, you know what? We took a detour on that. We need to go back and go the right way. We went down that path and we thought that was a way to go and we didn't. So for example, some training that we were starting to do, it was like, you know what, this is something that's a nice to do, but it's not a gotta do. It hasn't necessarily been yielding us as much revenue. So let's take a detour, right? Let's do that differently. Let's repackage it differently. We had some programs that we had not even turned into e-learning. We were wanting to get to it. And so we were like, now is the time. Let's take that detour and let's go do that. There were other things that we decided, let's sunset them. Let's stop doing them because they are not profitable. They're a waste of our time. They're too time consuming. There were a couple of partnerships that we had that were not yielding a lot of revenue from our initial contract. And so we just stopped. We stopped doing certain things. We stopped allowing clients, right? So for example, one of the things that we stopped doing, and you'll see this in my revenue stream, a lot of my clients were calling, or even colleagues were calling and saying, we need to, I talked to Dr. Davis, we just want to pick her brain. How many of y'all get those calls all the time? Want to pick your brain. Want to pick your brain. We stopped allowing people to just pick my brain and get all of this free information. We're like, you know what? They want thought leadership. They want consulting. They want best practices and strategies. So now we set that up as a service, and that became a part of our offerings. Is that, and we do it all the time now. In every proposal we put out there, and every contract we sign, if they want to talk about best practices and strategies, or they got some issues and stuff that they want us to help them solve through, that is a brain date. That is, you're gonna pick my brain, it's a brain date, and that is something that we charge for. The other thing too is just recognizing not only do you need to take some detours and some stops, but you also may need to take some U-turns and go back. Some things that you had not done, you'd put them on the shelf. Some things you've been meaning to do, now you have an opportunity to do it differently and pick it up and do it. So we started actually adding some additional new programs that we hadn't added before. The other thing too I'm big on is make sure that in your business, and certainly personally, that your business is clear on its purpose and clear on its mission. Has that changed? Did you need to update, refresh, and review it and make sure that you knew directionally where you were going? And not only you, but are you clear with your clients? Are you clear with your team? They need to know where you're going as well too. So reassessing your purpose. I'm a big believer personally. You need to know your big why. That's what drives your business. Your why. Too many people don't know their why. And I ask that question all over the world. How many of you today, right now, can articulate your purpose in life? Less than 10% of the hands in the room go up. So it's 90% of the people that truly do not know their why. And so if you don't know your why, know your purpose, then your business is flailing and it's actually just kind of being tossed to and fro and it goes with the wind. You want to have a specific direction. And that's what I was talking about in that last session. Stay in your lane. Do what you're called to do, what you're purposed to do. Your business should be aligned with your calling. Your business should be aligned with your purpose, with your big why. That's what drives you every day. That's what gives you passion. That's what makes you want to get up every day. That's what makes you accept even the failures and the setbacks, because you know still this is what I am purposed to do. There is a generation of people. There's an audience somewhere that needs what I have. We are the solution to somebody's problems. And so you cannot rest on your laurels that you are clear about it or that others are. You got to be intentional and you got to be strategic about what is your why. My why, I'm clear about it. And it's in my business, where you go see it, in every proposal is at the very top. We work with organizational leaders all around the world to help build cultures of inclusion and high performance where all talent can thrive. That's my business model, it's my business purpose. My personal purpose is that I want to help people get a larger vision for themselves, to get out of their head, to step into their greatness and live the life that they were called and created to live. I'm clear about that. When you're reassessing your purpose, you got to know where you're going short term and where you're going long term. So you have to do some reassessing. Last year was a great time to do some reassessing, even in your personal life. Yes, look at your business. So as I was talking about those street signs, that was basically what this was. It's saying, okay, what are some things that we just need to stop doing? What are some things we need to continue doing? And what are some things that we need to start doing differently? Start, stop, and continue. Start, stop, and continue. And where are we going next year? Where do I want to be in 2023? Where do I want to be in 2025? And what do I want to be in 2030 and 2050 when I'm rewiring, not retiring, rewiring, reassessing, big piece, right? And I'm a big believer too. Ladies and gentlemen, we oftentimes play too small. Can I say that again? We oftentimes in our business play too small. Here's the reality. If you have a vision and a dream that you can accomplish by yourself, it's too small. If you have a vision and a dream that you need help, you need to walk by faith, you're going to have to take some risk, and you need people around you like a personal board of advisors, that's a big dream. I call them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. But you need to think big and you got to dream big. If you're dreaming too small because you think that, oh, I can't do it, or I'm not big, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough education, or I just don't look the part, shame on you. You got to think big and dream big. Most people in life fail, not because they aim too high and miss, but because they aim too low and hit. That's tweetable. Most people fail in life not because they aim too high and miss, but because they aim too low and they hit. Yes, you know what? You will hear me talk a lot about Les Brown. You'll hear me talk a lot about some others because they have been instrumental in my life. See, I got around people who were smarter than me, more successful than me, been there, done that, had the t-shirt and the hat. I wanted to be around people who were not intimidated by my big, hairy, audacious goals. People who would push me forward and they weren't afraid that I would get to a head or too successful than them. I got around people who had already been doing the kind of business that I wanted to do. So when I joined NSA, it was a real blessing to me. And I felt like, yes, I'm at home, I'm around my people. And I say that loosely, but I also say that intentionally because it was people who had quit their jobs, people who had decided that this is the life that they wanted to live. And so it allowed me me to continue to build my faith, because it took me years to jump and grow my wings on the way down. I was so afraid to leave corporate America because I had a steady paycheck, a 6-figure income, steady benefits, and it was steady pay. And I had a daughter who I had to put in college. So I was afraid to take the leap and to take a chance on myself. But can I tell you, it took me 3 years to build my exit strategy. It took me 3 years to recognize that I am worth it. I can do it. I've got the skills. I got the education. I've got the experience. I've got the background. And I tell you, what I had to learn was the relationships that I have in my life, they were the new currency. Can I say that again? Relationships are the new currency. I would not be successful today in my business if it weren't for the people I surrounded myself with. Now, going back to what I talked about in the last session about relationships and getting around people who are different from you, that means people who have different experiences. You want to have people who can complement and they can offset what you don't have. They have experience and knowledge and success and wisdom that you need. And I do that for other people. Yes, relationships. When I say relationships are the new currency, going back to my HR days and running recruiting, we hired people that we knew, that we liked, and that we trusted. We paid people more that we knew, that we liked, and that we trusted. We promoted people more that we knew, that we liked, and that we trusted. Relationships. We hired people who would refer us to other people. Relationships. 95% of my business today comes through referrals. Relationships. When I need something, I need a resource, guess what I do? I go out on social media to my network, to my contacts, reach out to I got a group of people that are in my $1 million circle, and I'll say, okay, I'm looking for this resource. Got to hire a social media ninja. Need somebody to help me ghostwrite this. Need a CRM. Who do you use? Those relationships are the new currency. They're helping me to save money. They're helping me to make money. Who are the people in your circle? I talk about board of advisors, your personal board of advisors, people who you trust, people who will tell you like it is, people who will challenge you and tell you when you're wrong, but people who will say, go girl, you got this. People who will push you beyond your comfort zone, people who will tell you to jump and to grow your wings on the way down. You got to learn how to turn your contacts into contracts. Use your relationships to build contracts. All of my relationships that I've gotten, they have referred me to other people. And the more that they get to know you, the more that they trust you, the more that they respect the work that you do, those contacts will turn into contracts. Because remember, people hire and do business with who they know, who they like, who they trust. How many of you, when you're doing work, you need a resource, you need a referral, you're ready to do a contractor in your house, you're doing repairs. How many of you will pick somebody that has told you that they've used this person before already and they're good? Absolutely. They do the same thing with us as speakers and presenters. I'm here today because somebody told somebody about me. Y'all didn't just go pick me just off the internet and find me that way. I do get found that way on social media, but 95% of my contracts come from people who have referred me or seen me live, and I've given them obviously a reason. Contacts, turn them into contracts. So now this is how I want to end this, is that when you've done all of these things, you know how to move through change, you know your purpose in life, you're clear that you can't stay stuck in your endings and stay stuck where you're still trying to figure out your why. You can build revenue streams in your business. So let me share with you this, why it's so important that I had to reinvent my business. All of those things I had to do, but because I got to the right place in that change curve, I got over there to looking at possibilities and looking at the optimism and not the pessimism. I'm a big believer. One of the things that I've had to shift in my life was I had to go from being pessimistic to being optimistic. I had to go from looking at the glass half full, half empty, to going from it being half full to now I live my life and I think about the glass not being half full, the glass is overflowing. because I take that's the very, very nature of even the NSA, right? Is that we believe that the pie is bigger. I don't have a scarcity mentality. I'm not trying to compete against other people and making sure they don't get any. I don't have a crab mentality that I'm not willing to share and help and give and serve to other people and allow them to be successful, even if it means they become more successful than me. I'm a believer that we have enough to go around. I'm a believer that we are called and given the gifts that we have so that we can share, so that we can extend them to other people, so that the world becomes a better place because of us. We're supposed to leave people better and leave companies better and leave clients better because we were there. So I have an abundance mentality. That's what I'm sharing with you today. And that's what's helped me to be able to have the kind of business model that I have. So pre-pandemic, this is what my business model was. Right? So I was already doing some of these things. So let's talk a bit about them, ask questions. I'm here to share. I was doing RFPs and responding to them, requests for proposals for long-term contracts. Obviously, I had books that I was selling. I had webinars that I was doing. I was delivering keynotes, delivering and designing training. I had a mastery course. I did a couple of LinkedIn learning courses, and I was doing some coaching. How many of you would say, yes, I'm doing all of those things too? Not everyone, right? So let's hear from you. I want to hear from you. What are some of the ones you're doing in your business model? Some say, yep, some. Keynotes, training, consulting.
coaching,
Who else?
webinars.
Who else?
I said training, consulting, webinars.
Okay. Training, consulting, webinars. Good. So these are the things that I was doing 2019 and before, and 2020 March and before. These are things I was already a part of my business, doing very, very well. So when the pandemic hit, you can imagine how scary it was, because a lot of this stuff started to go away. So I had to immediately start to pivot and then start to look at ways that I could then take this stuff virtual. And guess what? Every one of these went virtual. I had a mastery course that was a 3-day course, a mastery in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then a leadership mastery. I was doing those live in person at a hotel ballroom. So that was a little scary to me. It's like, oh my God, I've never done a mastery course before virtually, but we spent a couple of days, me and my team, and we laid that thing out, and we delivered our first mastery course last August for a credit union. They took 68 of their leaders. Guess how I got that? Because one of my colleagues and friends who knew me for years said, oh, Dr. Davis has a mastery course. She has virtualized it, because I told her I did. And she trusted me with her client, and we made it happen. We took those 68 leaders through the mastery course in August and September, and it was a huge success. So we started doing more of those. I was like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. LinkedIn Learning, they had always been doing things virtually, but one of the things that they did in the midst of the pandemic was they then started having us do these virtual. I used to fly in to Sunnyvale, California every time I had to do a LinkedIn Learning course. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't even do any more LinkedIn Learning courses. Oh no, they pivoted too. And so I called them and I said, look, are you guys still doing any of the training? I'm happy to do something, virtually. And they were like, yep, we are. We have too many speakers who were used to coming out here, but they don't know how to do it on Zoom. They don't know how to do it live and how to do it through live webinars. So that's what we were doing. So you had to learn how to do these things. And now all of my stuff is on now, you can see is virtualized. Even strategic planning. We would do 3 sessions of strategic planning to help people come up with their long-term strategic plan. That had to be in person. We did post-it note exercises, and we had them brainstorming on index cards, and we had them doing stuff around the table and polling. We virtualized it, and we did one of the largest fraternities in the US, 16,000 members. And we did a strategic plan for them in September and October, and it's phenomenal. It looks amazing. And we did it all virtually. So we have learned that things that we didn't know we could even do virtually, we can do them. So now let me share with you what we did during the pandemic. So this was what our model looked like prior to. Now, this is what our model looks like today. So all those things that I just shared, plus more revenue streams. I talked about the brain dates. Now we do brain dates and consulting services for our clients. We wrote that in our proposal that we will give you for every training program. We'll do a pre-planning session and a logistical session, right? But if you want to talk about best practices and strategies and trends and want us to help you solve some issues happening in your organization, if you want us to help you with even, for example, messaging to your staff or putting out a statement of something that happened, we will do that. That's consulting services. So we charge by the session, 1 hour session. We now have taken our training programs and we put them in e-learning programs. Now we used to do a few. I had 2 e-learning programs prior to the pandemic. I had plenty of time then to now that we've got 8 e-learning courses. And now guess what we do? We take those courses and we bundle them. We don't just sell them by just one. We say, if you buy 4, you get it for this amount. You know how that goes, right? Buy 1, get 1, 50% off, or buy 2. And so that's what we did. We bundled them. We also, another revenue stream for us, and e-learning became huge, huge, huge when clients couldn't do anything else on site. And now what we've taught them, they've learned it, is that that's the better way to go, because we were able to reach more people. It was a lower cost of living, lower head count, and people can do it on their own time from their own smart device in their own way. So it's just been a huge, huge popular product for us. And then we were able to make more money on those because we offer client customization. What do you think that means when we say client customization on an e-learning? Somebody give me an example of what you think a customization might be.
Their logo.
Yes, good. We use their logo. What else?
Examples specific to their business.
Good, Alice, that's exactly right. So we charge them an extra couple of $100 per hour to do customization. So for example, like you just said, Alice, and I think someone else, Stephanie or Elena said the same thing, is we use their logo. Instead of my PowerPoint deck, we'll use their PowerPoint template. So we change it all into that. We will have their CEO or some C-suite leader record a 1 or 2 minute video on why this is important. And we drop that into the first part of the e-learning. We ask them for their values. We want to know what their competencies are. We drop that in throughout the training as well. I'll go back into the studio and record a couple of snippets that we can drop into the e-learning program so it looks and feels like theirs, and we charge them for the production of the video. So yes, that's the client customization. So not only did they buy the e-learning, now they bought the customization. And then not only do they buy the e-learning, when we talk about the e-learning, we license it to them. So we have a platform that we use for our e-learning called Thinkific. There's others like Kajabi, there's Mashable, and there's so many others. Thinkific is the one we loved. Easy, user-friendly, lots of great features and benefits, easy for us to do maintenance, great support behind the scenes. So we have it on our Thinkific site. But if a client has their own LMS, their own learning management system, we will then send them all the files, all of the content, the pre and post quiz and all of that kind of thing, and let them post it on their LMS. But we charge clients 3-year licenses to have it. 3-year licenses. Questions on that? That's one of our biggest money makers, and that's pajama money, because we don't have to do anything. We just give it. A lot of times they want it off the shelf. I'm in my pajamas making money while they watching it, while they got 20 or 30,000 employees watching it on their own time. So we do 3 years, and guess what? We do auto renewal. And guess what? After 3 years, if they want some more, we'll say we're going to refresh this because we know that things change so quickly. We'll refresh this, charge them a little bit of customization for that, and then they get 3 more years. Very lucrative. That's 6 figures right there for one e-learning course. We also still do more LinkedIn learning courses. Every time I think of a new hot topic and I'm being inundated by clients, I'll call back to LinkedIn learning and say, do y'all have a topic on this? Or I don't think you have a topic on that. Great. So we do more. So I now have 5 LinkedIn learning courses, and that alone is a 6-figure income. just, and you know, the way LinkedIn Learning does theirs is they go to thought leaders and they came to me first. I never went to them first, but now that I got the relationship, I'm maximizing that relationship, right? Relationships are the new currency. And so now, because I have the relationship with them and because I have success and my courses are extremely popular. So if you go to any, like my LinkedIn courses on leadership foundations, inclusive leadership, I got one on how to establish and build a diverse professional network. I got a couple of others, and I got a new one that they love my new book. So they want me to do a LinkedIn Learning course on living beyond what if. Yes, that is awesome. So they've got all of these courses. And so the thing about it is when you build a relationship with them, then you can go back and offer other things that they don't have. But they were on major build and establish mode last year because so many clients were asking for so many things. So I've been doing even more recently. I did one on how do you now live in a more remote workplace, right? So that kind of stuff. Licensing. How many of you license your keynotes? Or license your webinars or license your toolkits? Anybody? Yeah, so I'm telling you, I'm all kind of creative, sitting in front of the TV, watching my favorite Hallmark movies and just think, oh, that's a good idea, right? Oh, I can think about that one too. And this is what I'm learning, my friends, is that when you take the time, this is one of my learnings coming out of this. I was so freaking busy that I was on autopilot. I did not take the time to truly keep innovating. I have a lot of ideas all the time, but I let them go. This time I was able to say, no, you know what? Let's go with the things that are really working. We did some real research and some study and observations to find out what people want. So we now license our keynotes. So for example, Burlington is one of our big clients. Last year they came to us. They got over 25,000 employees. They were like, we want to train everybody on unconscious bias all before October the 31st, because we want to be ready for Black Friday, because it's going to be a big day, so nobody can be training. So from July until October, we were like, okay, yeah, we got e-learning. I didn't have two of the courses that they asked for, but I knew I could go into the studio and have it by the time I was going to roll it out to them. So I didn't say no. I was like, sure, we can do that. So we actually licensed the e-learning, but then they also wanted a couple of keynotes. So we literally, and this was just stuff, we were making it up, guys, as we went. We were like, see, I just said guys, but y'all know what I mean. But we were making it up and leveraging it as we went. When they said, do you have, we don't necessarily e-learning, we want those, but we also want to just have a keynote. Can you do some of those? Like, sure, we got several of those. I went right into the studio and recorded those keynotes. And what we do is we keynote for 45 minutes. It's recorded, and then we create little learning sheets for them, worksheets and handouts for them to follow along with it. And they can take it on their own time. We send it to them. It's in an MP4 video file, and they have it. We license it to them between a year and 3 years. Same thing with webinars. Yes.
Sorry, I was going to ask with the licensing of the keynotes, are you doing that through Thinkific as well?
No, when we do the keynotes, we don't put those up online. We will record them in my studio, and then we'll send the recording to them directly. Now, I have all the recordings, and guess what I've learned to do? When they don't ask for customization, then I am talking to a general audience. I don't even mention their name because it's off the shelf. So now I have all these recorded keynotes, and now we have a list of those in our proposals to say you can also have these pre-recorded keynotes. They're available for you. So they're not on e-learning. On Thinkific is really for the e-learning piece. The way we do that is like a 3 to 5 minute video with some worksheets and stuff like that to follow along, and then another 3 minute. So guess what though? We can take my keynotes, which we're working on, and we're going to break those up into little segments and put the handouts in there, turn them into e-learning as well. So we're repurposing some stuff. We also have a Train the Consultant and Certification and Licensing program that we built last year, and it's kicking off. So what does that mean? I have a lot of my colleagues and friends who are in my business of HR, leadership, organizational and culture transformation, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have a lot of tools because of my experience over the years working for companies who allowed me to do a lot of stuff. So I kept a lot of my stuff, and I have so much of it that now I am going to train consultants who have very small consulting firms, and they don't have a lot of resources. So a lot of them are like a one-person shop, and they have only 1 or 2 things that they do. So I'm going to train them on my systems, my methods, my processes, my assessments, all of my models. I'm going to train them. So they got to pay to go through the training, and then they will be able to buy a license to use all of my stuff for a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's a whole nother stream right there. And we're doing that now. It's coming up. I'm doing some for some DEI people. We only have 15 seats, but we're going to train them. And then for those who want to use all of my stuff, I'm going to let them have it, but it's going to be a licensing fee. Because you don't want people using your stuff and then they don't use it right. So I got to train them first and then allow them to use it and do it the right way. We also have a team referral program. What do you think that means? And Kim, let me know how much more time I have.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think a team referral program is? We kicked that off last year as well. What do you think? So let me share. So I have a team of 12 people on my team. What I've said to them, and some of them, like these are like 1099s, 3 of us are full-time, but I have some, the rest of them are 1099s, but they've been with me for 6 and 7 years. And they're just like very, very small consultants, independent, do 1 or 2 things here and there. So what I've said to them was, for those of you who have other clients that you're working with, if they ask you for a DEI strategic plan, if they ask you for leadership training, if they want to do a DEI audit, if they want to do some consulting, a brain date, and you don't have that stuff, refer them to us. Tell them that you have a strategic partnership with SDS Global Enterprises. We do a 3-way call. You hand them off to us, and then we'll do the work. And guess what? We send you a check. We do a 30% revenue share. Whatever we close that deal for, that becomes their pajama money. They don't have to do anything else. They just refer us. And so what I tell them is learn not to say no anymore. I don't say no to anything. When clients come to me, anything relative to HR, leadership, organizational development, that kind of thing, I don't say no. Even if it's not in our wheelhouse and we don't have it developed, guess what I do? I have that network of people and I'll say, you know what? This client is looking for specific stuff on how to be an anti-racism organization. Had that happen not too long ago. I was like, that's not mine. I'm focusing on the broad aspects of DE&I and what that means from an inclusion standpoint. So I said, I want to refer them to you. And that's exactly what I did, refer them to him. And clearly got a referral from that. And then again, made just a quick check off of that. So those are things that we can all do. So my team can get an extra income. Not only are they working on our team, but then they can refer me to some of their clients as well. Customized toolkits, we do a lot of those. So clients want us to do a toolkit for how to have tough, we call it tips for talking about taboo topics. So we do a customized toolkit for them. They may want to have a toolkit on unconscious bias. We'll customize it for them. And then strategic partnerships and alliances. This is another huge line of revenue stream for us. Is we specifically built partnerships. I reached out to some of my colleagues and I said, look, I know that you guys have a lot of things going on, but if you do have clients that you're working with, not just on my team, but I went out to some of my consulting, we may consider ourselves competitors, but we're really not. It's not competition, it's co-opetition. It's enough for all of us. Mm-hmm. So I said to them, if you have clients that you're working with and they need this particular thing and you don't have it, please don't tell them no. Please send them to us. We'll take good care of them. Let them know we're your strategic partner. And can I tell you, they loved it. They hadn't even thought about that. And so they have been sending them our way. I had a couple of mine. You all know Lenore Billings-Harris, and I can say that because she talks about it all the time. She's like now getting ready to retire. But, she's been in this space for nearly 30 years. She has put in the time. But she's like, all I want to do now is just keynote. I don't want to do all that consulting. So all of the people that she's known all of these years that come back to her, especially with the current environment we're in, she sends them all to me. And so I'll just send, she's like, I got a foundation now, send it to my foundation. I'll send her a referral check to a foundation. So that's how we work. I also have a couple of strategic partnerships with software companies. These are software companies like a HRIS system, like a payroll system. Like I got one, they're focusing, it's a whole hospital system, and they have a technology, a software package that tracks like who they're recruiting, who they're training, and all that kind of stuff. But they did not have any training and development on their software system. So they came to me and said, Dr. Davis, we have about 30,000 people in our association, and we have this great software, but we don't have any real training on leadership and diversity and inclusion and health inequities, and they need it. And so I was like, well, we got 17 courses. Do you know we built that, and it's a $500,000 revenue share, and we're doing a 60-40 split. 60, you do the math, right? So these are the kinds of partnerships and alliances that we're building. And this is stuff that we're just saying, you know what, we got so much content that we can take some of this stuff and put it out. So I used to be like a hoarder. You know how to like, protect your IP, I'm protecting it all right? So I'm putting it out there now, but I'm licensing it and allowing my brand. So whoever I license it to, I train them and certify them. By the way, we also do that too. We do train the trainer programs inside of companies. So for example, I'm working now with a large pharmaceutical company. They want to train 30 of their DEI, what they call champions, and part of their employee resource groups, and some of their leaders who are executive sponsors. So I'm going to actually go into their organization, train them on my materials so that they can train the rest of their company. They're like, we can't afford for you to train our some thousand people, but we can afford for you to train and certify our 30 leaders, and they'll do the training. So now I'm licensing and certifying them. That's a trainer with a licensing agreement. So those are some examples of ways that we can pivot, be strategic, be resilient, be marketable, right? Maintain our competitive edge and continue to innovate. All of these are streams of income that's driving my 7-figure consulting and speaking business. All right, so I'm going to stop there, answer any questions that you have. I know my time is just about out, but thank you so much for today, your engagement, your time. Thank you so much for your support and understanding, again, just how important some of this stuff is in this work we got to do. Kim, I want to turn it back over to you. And I just want to, again, thank you all. And again, stay connected with me online, pre-order my book. I know we didn't charge big money for you guys to be here today, but the book ain't but $19.95. And so I appreciate that support there as well. I mean, look, I would charge a client $10,000 for this day. I just ask you for $19.95 to sew back into a sister. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shirley. That was a lot to take away and a lot to work with. And thank you for sharing just all that you've done in terms of the revenue streams, which gives us some stuff to think about. We know that you could have been doing really anything else this morning, and we appreciate you giving us your time, and not just your time and energy, but sharing your brilliance. So this is a little something that we do for people that come to NSA Houston. When you're sitting around sometimes, if you were in person, we would have these handwritten notes, but I'll send this to you as a PDF file that just is a note of appreciation for some of the takeaways we got from this morning. And we want to say thank you for showing up for us. So we appreciate that.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing group this morning. Nice little intimate group, but I appreciate your engagement, your interaction with me. And thank you for the head nods, and thank you for the amens, and thank you for the chat box. Love it. Thank you for the love.
And thank you so
again
much
for asking me to be a part of today.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. And we're going to wrap up now. If there are any questions that you have, I've already gone and followed you on all your platforms, but I encourage you to follow Dr. Shirley, because she puts out great content and information to continue this learning. And as she said, relationships are the new currency. So I would encourage you to take advantage and start to build a relationship. And, relationships are not just one-way street. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn it back over to our president as we get ready to wrap up. Alana.
Thank you. Oh, wow, Dr. Shirley, thank you so much for that. I just have to giving you your flowers. That's a hand clap. We're so grateful for all of the content, for your energy, for your engagement, and just really how you showed up for us. So we're just so grateful that you just really modeled the spirit of Cabot in 1995 and so into a sister. We got you. So, hey, everybody, as we conclude today, this is an exciting time of year in any professional association, ours in particular. So we've got a lot of changes, right? All this stuff on the change curve. And there are a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. And so one way to do that, I won't keep you long, but I want to kind of be a little comprehensive in this. Hopefully you've seen on your newsletter already that we do have some changes to our membership model. And so what I want to do is point out that because in June 1st, we open that up and encourage everyone to renew your membership. And here's what's so exciting about it, especially for those of you that have been around NSA Houston for a while. We're making a major shift, as is Nationals, and I'll talk about that. But our local shift is that we are going to a single membership model. That means that your membership for the chapter is $295. I mean, that is like unheard, $295. And I see Stephanie's face, right? And that includes your all access pass. So we're going with an all-inclusive model for pricing. So that includes the benefits of all access pass. So you won't pay for each individual meeting. We will still have individual meeting prices. So when y'all bring a guest with you, bring a friend, make sure that you familiarize yourself with that as we launch that information. And then there is the ability to join the Speakers Academy, and be on the lookout for more information about the Speakers Academy for yourself or for someone that's been asking you, because I hope as NSA Houston members that you also advocate for the programs that we deliver and are oftentimes examples of how much those have benefited you. So $295 for the all-inclusive membership. As you see on there, there's an option. There's the $395 if you are not an NSA national member. Now let me pause and explain what that means. The National Association for Speakers, National Speakers Association has changed their model. And so their model is now a model where professional membership is not required. So the requirements to be a professional member aren't required to be a member of National Speakers Association anymore. We still acknowledge and celebrate and appreciate our professional members. We have professional member badges within the National Speakers Association. So there is still that designation. But in order to be a member, you just need to be a speaker and need to be willing to make that membership due investment. And I was making some changes in my slide. There we go. Because I wanted to be able to just show this real quick to appeal to that. So we've got the essential membership. Again, some terminology changes, but change is constant. So essential membership is $525 per year at the national level. You can do an advanced membership, which is really just bundling some more features in with your membership. So it's not a different membership, really. Your essential membership, you can bundle in some additional features, and the bundled all access pass, which would include influence and winter conference. And so again, there's a broader invitation to join the National Speakers Association. And when you do, then you get that local membership at just $295. Otherwise, it's $395. So we're really, really excited about that offer. Really, really excited about how membership is going to look next year. And so speaking of next year, our next meeting, which I'm sure Kim was going to mention, but we'll just kind of tag team this because I want to do this part, Kim. Our next meeting is our President's Celebration. And so I just wanted to mention that is a time for us to celebrate our members and past presidents of the chapter. We'll be joined by the NSA National Chair, Barry Banther. Kim's been working diligently to get that program working and you know, all the things that come with that. And so we're really excited that we'll have him and his energy and his excitement about what's going on in the industry. But it is also a time where we get to bring in our new slate of leaders for the 2021-2022 membership year. So join us next month. It's not the third Saturday this time, it's the fourth Saturday. So June 26th for the President's Celebration. And that's a time when we get to welcome in our new board members and celebrate our then past board members and acknowledge our members and past presidents. So lots of celebration going on in June, plus my birthday, but that's not, you know, what y'all were thinking about. So back to you, Kim, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I also want to thank you for that, Alana. I also want to add that this week on the 19th, we have a lab, which is free for members. It's an Instagram lab. So make sure that you go on and register. If it's a guest, I think that the fee is $10. But the person who's teaching us is, her name is Jasmine